Is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News 3 until 6 p.m. And I have got a massive Monday show lined up for you. Here's what's coming up in the first hour. Could it be liftoff for Rwanda? Now, Suella Braverman, our Home Sec, is currently talking in the House of Commons. She thinks two things. She thinks that European judges are going to back down and let those planes take off. She also thinks that people who oppose the Rwanda scheme are just virtue signalling snobs. What do you make of that? But in other news as well, it is indeed some big news, and it is indeed breaking. Boris Johnson has just submitted his dossier of evidence in the old partygate scandal. He thinks it will vindicate him completely and exonerate him completely. We'll bring you more detail on that as and when we get it. Some other big breaking news as well that just dropped about an hour ago is, of course, the RMT. They have struck a deal which could stop the strikes. Is this another win for Rishi Sunak? And just to finish us all off for this hour, we are going to be talking about whether or not we are indeed a nation of shoplifters. That's right, apparently shoplifting cases have soared, people have become addicted to it. I do want to know, what is the most pathetic thing you've ever nicked in your life? I've got all of that coming your way and much, much more. Don't go anywhere. Yes, OK, so a couple of email shout-outs for you today, ladies and gents. gbviews@gbnews.uk. The first one is, do you think people who oppose the Rwanda deal are just snobs? Are they snobs? Is that what you think it is? And also, as well, I do want to know, a little bit light-hearted, what is the most pathetic thing you ever nicked, probably as a kid? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Get those views coming in thick and fast, but right now, it's your headlines with Tamsin.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 3:02. The DUP says it will vote against the government in this week's first parliamentary vote on the new Brexit deal. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, agreed the new Windsor framework with the EU last month. It aims to resolve some of the concerns unionists hold around the Northern Ireland Protocol. Party leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson acknowledged significant progress has been made, but said the new proposed deal doesn't resolve some fundamental problems. Boris Johnson's written defence against claims he lied to Parliament over the partygate scandal has been handed to the Privileges Committee. The former Prime Minister will give evidence to the committee on Wednesday. It'll publish its findings on whether Mr Johnson committed a contempt of Parliament and then make a recommendation on any punishment. The House of Commons will make the final decision. A spokesperson for Boris Johnson says his position will be vindicated. The UN chief is calling on rich nations to accelerate their shift to net zero by committing to the earlier date of 2040. It's after a new report by the IPCC warns emissions must be halved by the mid-2030s if the world is to have any chance of limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. This is a key target from the Paris Agreement. The report, which Antonio Guterres has branded the survival guide for humanity, says there is little time to lose. China's president has called Vladimir Putin a dear friend as the pair sat down together in Moscow. President Xi Jinping is in Russia on his first visit to the country since the start of the invasion of Ukraine. Downing Street says it hopes President Xi urges President Putin to stop the war. He has called for pragmatism but acknowledged solutions aren't easy. Russia's president says he's open to a negotiating process on Ukraine, but warned he will not accept any ultimatums. Meanwhile, justice ministers from around the world are meeting in London to discuss increasing support for the International Criminal Court. On Friday, the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Russia's president on charges of war crimes. Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab says the 40 nations are united behind one cause: to hold those responsible for atrocities in Ukraine to account. President Vladimir Putin is accused of ordering the kidnapping and deportation of thousands of Ukrainian children. The Kremlin has called the allegations outrageous and unacceptable. The Home Secretary has spoken exclusively to GB News about the government's migration policy, insisting it's the right way to solve the small boats crisis. It comes after Suella Braverman said migrants could be sent to Rwanda by the summer. The agreement between the two countries has been expanded to include all illegal migrants, not just asylum seekers. Ms Braverman says she's held constructive talks with the European Court of Human Rights over possible reforms to the injunction that halted migrant flights to the country.
Our approach in the United Kingdom to stopping the boats is both firm and robust. Our illegal migration bill will make clear that if you arrive in the UK illegally, you will be detained and you'll be swiftly removed. And at the same time, it's humane and compassionate. And people who are relocated to Rwanda will receive a safe and secure reception. And I think those two elements, robustness with our legal processes in the UK, combined with compassion, is the way to solve this problem.
Members of the RMT and Network Rail have voted to accept an offer covering pay, jobs and conditions. Staff will receive a pay rise of between 9.2% and 14.4% and increased back pay. The union says its 20,000 members voted 76% in favour of the new deal. Downing Street says it's confident the UK banking system remains safe and well after the state-backed rescue of Credit Suisse. UBS agreed to buy its Swiss rival in a deal worth more than £2.5 billion. This morning, the FTSE 100 fell by 1% to its lowest level in more than 4 months. But the markets have now steadied. Shares in Credit Suisse dived by more than 60%. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
Yes, happy Monday, everybody. Right, now, there's so much to get through today. Let's get cracking. And we start, of course, with the latest on the government's plans to send migrants to Rwanda. Could it actually be liftoff? Now, in the last half hour, Home Secretary Suella Braverman has defended the proposals in the House of Commons. Braverman was in the Rwandan capital, Kigali, over the weekend, and we'll bring you an exclusive interview with her a little bit later on in the hour. But there are so many fast-moving developments to this story, we're going to struggle to keep up with all of them. But today, she pointed to the government's achievements in the last fortnight. She said there's been a deal agreed with the French that we all know about, the introduction of the illegal migration bill and her trip to Rwanda. Just on that illegal migration bill, shortly, I'm going to have a legal expert on, and we're going to talk about this, because I think a big sticking point was whether or not it was just going to get held up in the European courts. What's the news today? Well, that news is that potentially European judges might back down and allow the planes to take off, so we could stay in the ECHR and also protect our borders and get those flights taking off. If that happens, that would be a massive win for the government. But we'll delve into that very, very shortly. Suella Braverman has returned from Rwanda, but GB News' Home and Security Editor Mark White missed the plane and is still out there. I believe he joins me now. Mark, fantastic stuff. Mark White, I think, is with us in Rwanda. There he is. OK, good stuff, Mark. I mean, the weather looks absolutely lovely, but what have you learned? What have you been doing over there?
Weather's been terrible, actually. It's here, but you've caught us in between the showers. So there you go. It's been really a jam-packed visit for the Home Secretary. 2 days of being whisked around to different locations to see projects that are connected with the policy, should it ever get off the ground, to take asylum seekers, relocate them here to Rwanda for processing. And during that 2-day visit, she saw housing complexes, some of them funded by the UK taxpayer in partnership with the Rwandan government, but they don't know really how many asylum seekers they will have to house there, because really what they're aiming to do with the policy is to, yes, start relocating to people to Rwanda, but they're hopeful in short order that that will prove a deterrent factor, that it will break the people smuggling model, and in doing that they won't have to send any more people to Rwanda. If it doesn't break the people smuggling model, we could be looking at many thousands of people being relocated here. The Rwandan government, Patrick says, it is absolutely geared up to be able, over the course of this partnership agreement, which is 5 years, they are going to be able to accommodate many thousands of people, but not necessarily right away. Interestingly, what's going to happen to them for the first 3 to 6 months is that they are going to fill up Rwanda's hotels and B&Bs, hostels and the like, a bit like the situation that's unfolded over the last couple of years in the UK.
Look, Mark, thank you very, very much. And I know that you had a sit-down with Suella a couple of days ago, or yesterday. In fact, we're going to play that out later on in the show. So thank you very much, Mark. Mark White, there, our Home and Security Editor, who's in Rwanda for us, bringing the latest on the ground. Fascinating stuff, that, isn't it? Because, again, a lot of people, I think, were saying, well, what if it isn't a deterrent? Well, clearly the defence to that now would be, well, Rwanda will just keep taking people then, and it is kitted out for potentially thousands of people. Well, look, as I said a short time ago, Suella Braverman has been answering questions in the House of Commons this afternoon, and I've just got a couple of clips for you. This is, I believe she's still in the Commons, actually. This was just a few moments ago. Here's what she had to say.
In the last 10 days, the Prime Minister and I have secured a big deal with the French to increase cross-channel cooperation. I've presented and we've voted on measures to detain and swiftly remove illegal migrants. And this weekend, I met with refugees who have successfully been resettled in Rwanda and seen the accommodation that people will be using. What's the Labour Party done? Well, the Shadow Home Secretary's been on Twitter. She's very good on Twitter. She tweeted in the last 10 days, Labour's paltry excuse for a plan. Half of it's stuff we're already doing. The other half is their plan for open borders and unlimited migration. What I suggest they do is get off Twitter, get to Rwanda, and I'll show them how to stop the boats.
Oh, it's punchy stuff, isn't it? It's punchy stuff from Suella Braverman. But like I said earlier on, there has been a massive sticking point here that people were wondering, how on earth are we going to get around this? It's all very well and good having an illegal migration bill. It's all very well and good saying we're not going to allow anyone to reapply for asylum in this country. We're going to get people shipped over there, or flown over there, really, to Rwanda. But what about those European judges? Are they going to be able to just block it? And here we go again in some kind of vortex of misery where nothing actually happens. We've been here before many times. Well, this is potentially the breakthrough, and it's the line on the front of a lot of newspapers today, and it's one that we're going to discuss now, which is whether or not European judges are actually about to back down, do the old reverse ferret, and allow us to get the planes off the ground. I'm joined by Ivan Sampson, who is an immigration lawyer. Ivan, thank you very, very much. Now, what could this really mean? Because this was a big sticking point. There is that old adage, isn't there, of, you know, foreign judges in the dead of night getting involved and stopping us being able to control our borders. Suella Braverman clearly feels as though she's managed to find a way around that.
We don't know that yet. And the Rule 39 is an important safety net to stop the abuse of power by member states of the European Convention. So it's an important piece of law that must be protected. But it could be, well, it could be that they may amend the procedures to make it difficult to make last-minute applications. Judicial reviews were suspensive. Once you made a judicial review application, removals will be stopped. Well, the government changed that to make it non-suspensive. So it could be that the injunctions would be non-suspensive. Any application would be non-suspensive, and you'd have to challenge
what does this really
from
mean?
wherever you get to.
Break it down for idiots like me. So from the way I was looking at it, we were able to pass things through our own courts. We were able to put people on a plane, on the runway, with the lights on, and then all of a sudden someone that we'll never know, who's possibly never even been to Britain, says, no, you can't do that at the last minute. And will that be able to stop?
Rule 30, until we see what the new rules are, we don't know. But look, the European Court of Human Rights is very important for this country. Now, your viewers will wonder, well, how does it affect me? I mean, what impact will this have to my life? Well, let me tell you. The reason that we have LGBT community in the armed forces is because of a European ruling. The reason that homosexuality is decriminalised in Northern Ireland is because of a European court ruling. So, and it's really important that as a citizen of this country, if I'm challenging my own country, I want to make sure that I can challenge it in a court outside of this country. It's a protection for you and me, Patrick.
I get how that is relevant when it comes to gay people who want to join the military or gay people who want to be gay in Northern Ireland. I'm just trying to drill down on how on earth this might be relevant to, let's say, a criminal trying to cross the Channel illegally and living next door to you. So would this mean that that person would find his way to Rwanda quicker than they would previously? If we managed to negotiate a deal with the ECHR, European judges, where we can say this Rule 39, which is the rule that essentially has been causing the last-minute stoppages to this, there can be a way around this, and so that doesn't happen, because that appears to be our only gripe with the ECHR at the minute, really, and it would mean that we could just stay in it and live quite happily in it, as long as that didn't exist.
Well, it's not just about... The Rule 39 just stops the flight. The conflict between if this bill becomes law and the European Convention is Article 3. That's the conflict, the right to life. And they can't... The courts are not satisfied. They've been... when I say the High Court granted permission to go to the Court of Appeal on the Rwanda policy, whether it's legal or not, they're not satisfied that the government have made adequate inquiries. And so it's not just about Rule 39, it's about Article 3, and it's also about the Refugee Convention. So if this makes it onto the statute books, it doesn't mean it's unlawful. Any law with King's assent on it is lawful, but it's going to conflict with our international treaty obligations.
What I don't understand is how the EU members themselves were allowed to strike deals with places like Rwanda, and that they were allowed to send people over there, and they were allowed to do similar things to what we're talking about doing now, but it's such a massive issue for us to want to do it.
Well, what the courts have brought out is that the government haven't done their preparatory work. They haven't made the proper inquiries. This government is so keen to get this across the line that they're willing to do deals with a country who has got a history of killing political opponents. Look, if a refugee goes to Rwanda and publicly voices opinions against the leader, Paul Kagame, there's a very good likelihood that person will end up in prison, and there's a very good likelihood that person will end up dead, because that's what's happened to opponents of the leader of Rwanda.
But now that Suella Braverman has gone there, and it appears done some due diligence and met people and tried to get a better handle on exactly what the situation is going to be out there, we think that this might be now why, and I'm reading it on the front of numerous different newspapers, I've got the Mail in front of me here, Euro judges set to back down on Rwanda flights. They might feel more content that we have done our due diligence and that Rwanda actually is safe and a great place to go and live.
Well, that depends on the evidence they provide. But what the government have done is put all the eggs into this one basket, this deterrent. If it doesn't work, if the numbers don't... If the flights go off to Rwanda and the numbers don't go down, what next?
OK, all right. Look, thank you very, very much, Ivan. Great to have you on the show, as ever. Ivan Sampson there. Look, it is potentially quite a big break to do this. A lot of people were wondering whether or not we were going to be able to stay in the ECHR at the same time as actually getting flights off the ground to Rwanda. Clearly, if they are satisfied that we're sending them to a safe country that is perfectly OK for people to go and live, that our government has done its due diligence, then actually it might be the best of both worlds, because we could stay within the ECHR, we wouldn't have to create such a massive uproar, and the Tory infighting potentially over that could stop, at the same time as being able to offer a visible, serious deterrent to people who want to come over illegally in the Channel. And if it doesn't offer a deterrent as well, the other benefit for Suella Braverman at the moment is what she's saying, which is that Rwandan government is fit and able to take more people as well. What do you make of all of this, ladies and gentlemen? Is this a sizable development? I'm also keen to get your views on a clip that we're going to play later on. So we're going to hear directly from Suella Braverman, exclusively to GB News, and part of what she had to say there, I think, is fascinating. She was talking about the fact that a lot of people, in her view, who are against the Rwanda scheme are people who've never been to Rwanda, who don't really know what it's like, and actually they are snobs. So we're going to be talking about all of that. And I'm inclined to agree with her on this. I think a lot of people who are against the Rwanda plan are people who maybe sent their kids to a nice posh boarding school somewhere in the middle of nowhere, so their kids aren't affected by maybe day-to-day life, really, as it were. They live in a lovely house in potentially quite a rural area, or a nice secluded gated community, or just somewhere a bit off the beaten track where, again, maybe they're not really anywhere near something kind of migrant hotel or asylum seeker hotel. Maybe actually they're rather well off and they're not actually touched or impacted upon by the real-world impacts of people coming over in small boats and being put up in hotels. And for what it's worth as well, there's been a fascinating report into this, and we're going to touch on that recently. Some 350 asylum seeker hotels in England alone. That is absolutely staggering. That means that 350 parts of England alone are impacted upon as a result of having these asylum seeker hotels. And when you look at it in that context, do you not think that it's about time that something was done about it? GB Views at gbnews.uk. A reminder, yes, that we will bring you an exclusive interview with Suella Braverman a little later this hour. But you may remember the shocking story of the asylum seeker that entered the UK illegally and posed as a schoolboy before fatally stabbing an aspiring Royal Marine to death in a row about an e-scooter. Well, Lawangin Abdulrahimzai was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 29 years in January. Well, it's now being reported that the 21-year-old benefited from almost £40,000 of legal aid to fight his case, despite being in this country illegally. So the cash was for a barrister at trial and a solicitor at previous interviews. With me now is political commentator Dominique Samuels, who joins me. Dominique, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So I think it's worthwhile just highlighting some stories like this in light of what's been going on in the House of Commons today, in light of the Rwanda scheme, etc. I mean, this guy, supposedly the taxpayer, is out of pocket to the tune of around £40,000 just to prop up his legal biz, when a lot of people would say he shouldn't have been in the country to begin with, Dominique.
Well, exactly. Common sense would say that he shouldn't have been in the country in the first place. And if our rules weren't so lax, if our borders weren't virtually open, this person couldn't have come into the country, been able to go to school here under a fake age, and wouldn't have then gone on to kill another person. I mean, common sense would say that was a normal thing. But sadly, this case isn't rare. It's happening all of the time. It's happening all over the country. And the activists just bury their head in the sand. It's not important to them. And look, when we highlight stories like this, we're not saying that every single asylum seeker is a triple killer, as this illegal migrant is. But we're saying that you open the door to these sorts of dangers. We don't live in a world of flowers and daisies, and people do take advantage of the fact that we aren't protecting our borders properly. And the question is, why would you invite more of a potential problem into the country, especially when it's illegal? It makes no sense.
Dominique, I'm just going to put this to you. Now, I get what you're saying about the extent of the issue when it comes to public safety, OK? Look, it is important to say that in this particular case, Lawangin Abdulrahimzai, a triple killer, posing as a schoolboy, getting 40 grand's worth of taxpayers' cash and legal aid. Well, yeah, it is exceptional just in itself, that one, but I get your point absolutely about the wider issue about public safety. Just on that, Suella Braverman, as we're going to hear from her shortly, was alluding to the fact that she thinks that the people who oppose the Rwanda plan really are kind of virtue signalling snobs whose lives really might not actually be impacted by the true extent, the shocking extent of asylum seeker hotels in this country and the issues that they face. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that, because the reality is most of the people that are advocating for this continued influx of illegal migration, or they're opposed to the Rwanda scheme because it's apparently inhumane, they don't live in the areas that are most affected by this influx of illegal migrants or illegal migration, or generally just high levels of migration. They aren't affected by it. They don't live in the areas where public services are stretched. So therefore, when you're not exposed to the stark and really quite miserable reality of something, it's easy just to put on rose-tinted glasses and make out like it's not an issue. And look, I genuinely do believe some of these people are coming from a place of compassion. They think they're doing the right thing. They think they're being humanitarians. And look, there are many people that come over here from different countries that do have genuine need. But what we're saying is that we're noticing a trend of our system being gamed, and we quite simply don't have the capacity for so many people. And secondly, for the people that are really critical of the government, they hate the Tories, they acknowledge that the Tories aren't funding public services correctly. Why then would you invite more people to put more pressure on a system that you already acknowledge isn't working? Logically, that doesn't make sense either.
Yeah, look, Dominique, thank you very much, as ever. Dominique Samuels, our political commentator, just reacting to a couple of things, which is, of course, that first case about an individual who, frankly, should never have really been in the country at all, triple murderer, posing as a kid, then racking up 40 grand in legal fees, legal aid, so the taxpayer funded as well, which is rather shocking. I'm just going to read you very quickly something here about the amount of private firms that are making an absolute fortune out of these asylum seeker hotels, and documents show that one booking agency used by the Home Office trebled its tax profits, its pre-tax profits, from £2.1 million to £6.3 million in the 12 months up to February 2022. There are 363 migrant hotels in England alone, 20 in Northern Ireland, 10 in Scotland, 2 in Wales. And when you look at it like that, all of a sudden the Rwanda scheme, I think, is really put into focus, isn't it? That's really why we're doing this. It's not, in my view anyway, because the government hates people coming over on small boats. It's because of this cost and this massive, massive use of hotels. Anyway, we're moving away from that for a little while. It seems to have been going on forever, but there are fresh developments in the Partygate saga today. A source close to Boris Johnson has said his dossier on Partygate has been submitted to the Privilege Committee. That was today, moments ago, apparently. The former Prime Minister will appear before the committee on Wednesday to defend himself against claims that he lied to Parliament. Johnson was photographed at a number of events in Downing Street that broke lockdown rules. Last year, he said in the Commons that lockdown rules were followed, and he does believe, or at least his legal representatives do, that he will be vindicated and exonerated by this dossier. I do want to know a little bit from you, though. Do you actually care anymore? Are you a bit over Partygate or not? Do you want the truth out there? For me now is Olivia Rutley, GB News' political reporter. Olivia, great stuff, and very on brand with the GB News brolly as well. You love to see it. So what's going on here? Will Boris Johnson be vindicated?
Well, it'll be very interesting to see what happens. Essentially, what this committee is looking into isn't whether Boris Johnson broke the lockdown rules. We know that he did. He's admitted that. They're not even looking into whether he misled Parliament. He has admitted that he misled Parliament by setting the record straight in Parliament. What they're looking into is whether he deliberately misled Parliament, whether, in fact, he lied to Parliament. Now, Boris Johnson today has submitted this 60-page dossier, which essentially lays out 3 defences as to why he didn't deliberately mislead and why he should be found innocent, as it were, of this charge. One of them is that Harriet Harman, who's chairing the committee, a Labour MP, veteran Labour MP, Boris Johnson will argue that she is biased. Now, that is based on tweets that Harriet Harman tweeted out last year, suggesting that Boris Johnson knowingly lied, is the phrase that Harriet Harman used. So Boris Johnson will use that to say that that shows that the whole inquiry is too biased and shouldn't be allowed to go through. His other defence is that what the MPs in the committee are judging is not whether he knowingly misled, which we know is a resigning offence. Lying to Parliament is a resigning offence. They've changed the wording. They're now saying knowingly or recklessly. Now, recklessly is lowering the bar, and Boris Johnson will argue that that's unfair. He'll say that they've moved the goalposts. To look into whether he lied deliberately is fair enough, he'll say, but looking into whether he recklessly misled, well, what exactly does that mean? And his third argument argument is that he was advised by his own officials that he was within the rules. So when he spoke to Parliament, when he said that he didn't break the rules, he will say that he was acting on the advice of his officials. So those are his three defences, and his own legal team is sounding very, very bullish about this. But it'll be very interesting to see what the committee make of it. Just in terms of timings, he has submitted the report to the committee now, but the committee now gets to decide when it will release the information which he has given them. It's thought that it could take a few hours, up to 24 hours. We could be seeing this tomorrow, but they're marking his homework now, and it'll be very interesting to see what they make of it.
Yes, indeed. Look, Olivia, thank you very much. Olivia Utley there, our political reporter, underneath the GB News brolly out in what looks like a very wet Westminster. Well, look, today, believe it or not, is the International Day of Happiness. But this won't cheer you up. We could be on the brink of another global banking crisis. Yes, that's right. We're keeping it light here on GB News, people. We're keeping it light. But seriously, this does affect you all. It affects the pound in your pocket. And we need to know what on earth is going on with the banking crisis. Is it even a crisis? I'm Patrick Christys. Maybe that's the thing to make you happy. It's not a crisis. I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
All right, wonderful people. There's loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. Don't forget, I'm going to bring you an exclusive interview with Suella Braverman about the government's Rwanda plan. She thinks that people who oppose it are just virtue-signalling snobs. Do you agree? And is Donald Trump really about to be arrested? I will ask a leading Republican about all of that. I've got all of that coming your way and much, much more, including Are We a Nation of Shoplifters? And a little bit on International Happiness Day. Woo! There we go. All right, but first it's your headlines with Tamsin.
Patrick, thank you. It's 3:32. Here are the headlines. The DUP says it will vote against the government in this week's first parliamentary vote on the new Brexit deal. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, agreed the new Windsor framework with the EU last month. It aims to resolve some of the concerns unionists hold around the Northern Ireland Protocol. Party leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson acknowledged significant progress has been made, but said the new proposed deal doesn't cover some fundamental problems. Members of the RMT at Network Rail have voted to accept an offer covering pay, jobs and conditions. Staff will receive a pay rise of between 9.2 and 14.4% and increased back pay. The union says its 20,000 members voted 76% in favour of the new deal. The UN chief is calling on rich nations to urgently accelerate their shift to net zero by 2040. It's after a new report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warns emissions must be halved by the mid-2030s if the world is to have any chance of limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. This is a key target from the Paris Agreement. The report, which Antonio Guterres has branded the survival guide for humanity, says there is little time to lose. China's president has called Vladimir Putin a dear friend as the pair sat down together in Moscow. President Xi Jinping is in Russia on his first visit to the country since the start of the invasion of Ukraine. Downing Street says it hopes President Xi urges President Putin to stop the war. Vladimir Putin says he's open to a negotiating process on Ukraine, but warned he will not accept any ultimatums. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News. Now, it's back to Patrick.
Yes, well, Downing Street and the Bank of England are assuring that the UK's banking system remains safe and sound. This followed on from this morning as European bank shares dropped sharply again in the wake of the rescue of troubled bank Credit Suisse by rival UBS. Markets in London have steadied since, but it follows a turbulent 10 days for money markets and banks across the globe following the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank, easy for me to say, in the United States. Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, what does all of this really mean for you? Your normal man and woman out there, the money in your pocket, your mortgages, the price of everything. Joining me in the studio right now is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. Talk me through it, Liam.
It does seem really otherworldly, doesn't it, Patrick? The gnomes of Zurich angsting over their lunches in their expensive suits about the state of their banking system. And yet this really matters. It doesn't give me any pleasure to say it. We all, or many of us, will remember the financial turmoil that followed 2008. Then there was more financial turmoil in 2011-12 with that Eurozone crisis, and then quite a lot of angst after that Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng budget spectacular last autumn. And the Truss Kwarteng financial turmoil and this financial turmoil are related because banks have bought over recent years lots of government bonds. They've almost been told to by the regulators because they are meant to be very, very safe assets. But when interest rates go up, and of course we've seen the Bank of England raise interest rates from 0.5% to 4%, 10 rises in a row. We've seen the mighty Federal Reserve in the US raise interest rates. That means those bonds on the bank's balance sheet are worth less. Their balance sheet is weaker. That means the loans that they've extended, the investments that they've made look riskier. That's what happened with Silicon Valley Bank in America. Of course, you'll remember HSBC, British Bank, bailed out the UK arm of Silicon Valley Bank. And Silicon Valley Bank is a sort of relatively small bank. What's been happening in recent days is that a massive Swiss bank, Credit Suisse, one of the top 30 banks in the world, what we call systemically important banks, there's been lots of investor nervousness, again, about the impact on them of rising interest rates. So over the weekend, the Swiss authorities came in and said to the CSFB, Credit Suisse, you are being sold to your arch-rival UBS, 160-odd years of banking history, wiped out overnight. This is not a joke.
I'm just mesmerised by the way that you talk about it, really, because it just seems so massive. But the average kind of man and woman on the street, then, if people are looking at getting mortgages and things like this, I mean, what does that mean to them, really?
OK, in the here and now, right, let's say that it remains relatively calm. And as you rightly said at the beginning, and we mustn't panic people unduly, financial markets have stabilised this morning and this lunchtime in the aftermath of that massive bit of financial engineering over the weekend, on top of the failure of Silicon Valley Bank a couple of weeks ago. If it stays stable, I still think that this Wednesday, when the Federal Reserve makes its next interest rate decision, it will keep interest rates on hold, despite the fact they still want to try and stamp on inflation. And that will mean our own Bank of England on Thursday then keeps interest rates on hold at 4%, which is good news if you're trying to get a mortgage, not so good for savers. But I do think those interest rates will be held. On the other hand, if you are trying to get a mortgage, if you're trying to take out a business loan or whatever, you got variable rate loans, then I do think the fact that there is more instability knocking about will anyway push market interest rates up, not the base rate of the Bank of England and the Fed, but I think market interest rates could still go up. Look, this should be a million miles from everyone's life, right? We just go to work, we try and pay our bills, we try and keep house and home together, right? And do our best for ourselves and our families. And yet the danger is here, Patrick, and I really worry about this. If we have yet another financial collapse, the way we had one in 2008, and we haven't really recovered properly from 2008, the world economy has never really got going again. It's never really got out of second gear. Growth has been slow. The massive damage that was done to global banking systems in 2008 after years of massive financial excess, not nearly the right kind of regulation. If it turns out that the post-2008 regulation, which a lot of the banking industry fought tooth and nail, which was diluted again and again and again, only really came in this country, 2018, 2019, if we're honest. If it turns out that that regulation wasn't enough to stop these collapses, which impact everyone, spreading what we call contagion across the financial system everywhere, then I really worry about what ordinary punters are going to think about the clever people in the banking industry, in the government, and in the media, frankly, who are meant to get these things right.
Liam, thank you very much, as ever. Liam Halligan, their economics and business editor, just picking you through the very, very latest. We will, of course, be keeping you bang up to date on all of that. But moving on, a poll last week found that 6% of people would vote for Reform UK. And I get a lot of emails in about this, gbviews@gbnews.uk. A lot of people saying, I'm going to vote for Reform, I'm sick of everything else. If a general election was held tomorrow, 6% of people would vote for Reform UK, apparently. And the party that has Nigel Farage as its honorary president enjoyed a major boost today when it announced 11 former Brexit Party MEPs are joining. So Reform UK held a news conference this morning, and our political reporter, Catherine Forster, was there, and she joins me now. Catherine, thank you very much. OK, so what's going on for Reform, then? And why should we care?
Well, they are saying that they have 10% of the vote, and they've announced today that 11 former Brexit Party MEPs are joining Reform. That includes people like former Conservative MP Anne Widdecombe, people like Ben Habib. They say that they are going to be standing in about 500 constituencies in the local elections coming up in May, that they're going to be standing absolutely everywhere in the general election, and they're saying they offer a real alternative to Labour and Conservative that Richard Tice, the leader, says are socialist sides of the same coin. They say that the Conservatives have forgotten what it is to be Conservative, that Labour have no coherent policies, and that they offer a distinct choice. Now, they are very unhappy about Brexit. They feel it's been portrayed. They feel that leaving Northern Ireland partly in the European Union, as the Boris Johnson's deal did, and as the Windsor framework arguably does in the EU single market, is a betrayal. And they also have a different offering on other policies too. They're saying they want low taxes, low state, but also no waiting lists for NHS treatment. So some policies that sound wonderful, but how those would actually be delivered in practice, that's not entirely clear.
Yes, indeed. Now, we're getting 2 for 1 from you today, Catherine, because we were initially talking about reform, and then there was some big breaking news shortly before we came on air about the RMT. So apparently, rail strike misery could now be a thing of the past. I believe that an overwhelming number of the RMT's members at Network Rail, anyway, have agreed to a deal. What do we know about this?
Yes, it is a big breakthrough this afternoon, isn't it? These rail strikes, it's about a year since the dispute first started. The RMT have reached a deal this afternoon. There was a 90% turnout, 76% voted in favour. These are signal workers and maintenance staff agreed a deal with Network Rail that they say is between 9% and 14% pay rise over 2 years. So that's great news. However, the RMT workers that work for the 14 train operating companies, they have yet to reach a deal. So at the moment, there are still currently scheduled strikes for the 30th of March and the 1st of April. But Mick Lynch of the RMT is claiming victory in this, and he's basically waiting to see the right offer now for the train company workers. So it does seem this is one of the longest running strikes. It feels to have been interminable. The last one was just on Saturday, just gone, that the end may be in sight for the rail strikes and potentially other strikes, though other ones seem to be popping up all over the place at the moment too, don't they? Like the passport office workers.
Yes, indeed. Yes, look, Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Forster, our political reporter in Westminster for us. Look, some pretty good news that, potentially, for us all, which is that the RMT might be about to stop their strike action. Apparently, some 70-odd% of the 90% of people who voted in that particular ballot decided that they were going to accept the terms. Is that bad news for Mick Lynch? Who's won in all of this as well? This is what I find fascinating on it, because I think both sides can claim victory, and that probably means that it's a good deal and we can all pack up and go home, because the unions will clearly say, look, without the strike action and the misery that we caused, then there's no way on earth that we would have been able to get a better deal. The government, at the same time, can legitimately say, well, we didn't give in to the winter of discontent. So maybe it's best for both sides. But look, when I come back, Home Secretary Suella Braverman has given GB News an exclusive interview, and, well, she's got some very, very harsh words for Gary Lineker. She's accused him of being a snob, and I want to know from you, do you think that the majority of people who oppose the Rwanda deal and who don't want people to be allowed to just come here and live after they've crossed here illegally in the Channel are actually just virtue signalling, out of touch snobs? What do you make of all of that? GB Views at gbnews.uk. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is, of course, GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, The People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Strap yourselves in for our big exclusive interview with Suella Braverman. Now, if you've been on social media in the last few days, you might have seen that not everyone was happy that GB News were invited to join the Home Secretary in Rwanda. Well, if you weren't happy, guess what? We don't really care, because Suella Braverman spoke to GB News' Home and Security editor Mark White, and she challenged Gary Lineker and other critics of her Rwanda policy to visit the country and see the opportunities for asylum seekers there. And in fact, as well, she accused them of being snobs. Let's have it.
Home Secretary, we're at this incredible cricket ground, participating in the programme to promote community integration through sport. One of the many programmes that you've seen here in Rwanda as they gear up to take asylum seekers from the UK eventually. Are you convinced that they can have a good life here in Rwanda?
Yes. What we've seen this weekend in Rwanda is that our partners here are ready to, they're ready to support the UK in our work to stop the boats and to fix our challenge of illegal migration. We've seen accommodation and construction projects which are well advanced and which will be completed very soon. So that accommodation will in part be there to accommodate in the long term people who will be resettled to Rwanda from the UK. People who come to the UK illegally will not have the right to settle in the UK, and that's what our legislation proposes. And working with our friends in Rwanda, the people who come here will be resettled to live a safe and secure life. That's the humane approach, and that's the compassionate approach.
The policy still, of course, has its critics, Gary Lineker for one, opposition politicians. Would you encourage them actually to come here and see for themselves what Rwanda has to offer those who would come here and settle?
Absolutely. I think there has been far too much prejudice, frankly, snobbery amongst the critics, who most of whom haven't even visited Rwanda. This is my third visit to Rwanda. This is a welcoming country. It's a dynamic economy. They have a proud track record in supporting and resettling refugees in the region. I've just met several refugees from Eritrea, from Burundi, from the Democratic Republic of Congo, who found sanctuary here in Rwanda, and they have nothing but gratitude for Rwanda. So to all of those critics who display a gross prejudice against Rwanda, I tell them to visit first and then judge.
Is it tantamount to racism?
I think there has been knee-jerk reaction, and from the usual suspects, let's be honest. The reality is very different to how the critics would portray Rwanda. Rwanda is dynamic. Rwanda is welcoming. Rwanda has a tradition of providing humanitarian support of a high quality, and the housing project that we visited is one such example of where people who are resettled refugees will be able to be accommodated in sustainable and good quality accommodation.
But how do you answer that central charge that the UK is abrogating its central responsibility here to offer refuge, to safe haven to those asylum seekers who end up in the United Kingdom?
Well, coming to Rwanda or being resettled to Rwanda via the UK, if you've come to the UK illegally, will be a blessing. You will be provided with humanitarian support. It will be a humane provision for you. But I also say that ultimately we need to stop the people smuggling gangs, and that's why Rwanda is important. The people smuggling gangs are exploiting thousands of people. They are people are paying thousands of pounds to take an illegal journey, to take sometimes a tragically fatal journey, to break our laws and to undermine our rules in the vain hope that they might have a life in the United Kingdom. By working with our friends here in Rwanda, we break the business model upon which these gangs are operating.
Isn't there a fundamental contradiction here in the sense that you say this policy will be a deterrent to those crossing the channel, yet you're also here and you're showing what, in many respects, is incredible opportunities for those coming here.
What I'm trying to show is that our approach in the United Kingdom to stopping the boats is both firm and robust. Our illegal migration bill will make clear that if you arrive in the UK illegally, you will be detained and you'll be swiftly removed. And at the same time, it's humane and compassionate. And people who are relocated to Rwanda will receive a safe and secure reception. And I think those two elements, robustness with our legal processes in the UK, combined with compassion, is the way to solve this problem.
I mean, given what your colleague Oliver Dowden has said in terms of being regretful that this policy is in place, how does that square again with a partnership that you say is very important for not just helping to solve the asylum seeker issue in the UK, but also to help support Rwanda, to help ensure that countries like Rwanda can take refugees from their own continent rather than them embarking on the journey? How do you square that?
It is regretful. It is regretful that we had 45,000 people arrive illegally in the UK last year. It's regretful that we're spending £6 million a day accommodating many of them in hotels throughout towns and cities in the United Kingdom. It's regretful that we spent £3 billion last year to service our asylum needs. That is what is regretful. We have an enormous and very difficult problem that we need to fix. The Prime Minister has made it one of his core pledges to stop the boats.
But you don't regret this policy?
But the policy of our new bill, the illegal migration bill, combined with our world-leading partnership with Rwanda, is the solution. That is our approach that we are putting forward to fix this problem, and I do believe it will work. I have huge confidence in this partnership. I have huge confidence in Rwanda, and I believe that it will be modelled by other countries in due course.
Are you in talks with other countries to see whether there is a possibility of similar partnerships, or do you think that actually Rwanda is the one partnership that will end the small boats crisis?
Well, actually, on the back of our victory in the High Court at the end of last year, where our partnership was rigorously tested by senior judges in court as to whether it was lawful, and in which the UK government was successful in proving that our partnership is lawful, that Rwanda is a safe country, that our partnership complies with all of our international and human rights laws. On the back of all of that, we have been in discussions with other countries, but let me be clear, our first and foremost priority is to operationalise the partnership that we have with Rwanda, and as you can see, we are making very good progress in rolling it out.
I know you want this bill to work, you want this policy to work. If you are still met with these legal challenges, it just doesn't progress anywhere. You still have thousands of people coming across the channel. Will you commit to pulling out of the ECHR?
Well, I'm confident that our package of measures will work. That's why the Prime Minister and I are working very hard at passing our. We've introduced the bill. We hope that Parliament supports it so it can get through to royal assent quickly. But let me be clear, nothing is ever off the table, and we have to always consider every option as the events pan out.
OK, Home Secretary, thank you very much for talking to us on GB News. I don't think there's been a 6 scored today, but a good game by the looks of it.
Thank you.
Right, well, there we go. What do you make of that, ladies and gents? Suella Braverman talking exclusively to our very own Mark White. It did certainly ruffle a few feathers that GB News was one of the press pack invited to go to Rwanda with the Home Secretary, and I wonder why. There we go. But anyway, look, people, lots of you getting in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk. The Lineker Islington crew inside the M25 have no understanding of what illegal migration does to our country. They don't see crowded classrooms, doctors' waiting rooms and other overstretched services. And that is why I'm asking you, do you think that people who disagree with the Rwanda Rwanda scheme are just snobs. But yes, this is the best place for coverage of the government's plans for the migrant crisis, and soon I will find out what Nigel Farage thinks about sending migrants to Rwanda. He will join me live on this show very, very shortly. I've got all of that coming your way and much, much more as well. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, welcome aboard, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. I'll be with you all the way through until 6 p.m. But in the next hour, here's what's on the menu. Is it liftoff? It's a massive day, potentially, for the Rwanda migrant scheme. Suella Braverman, who's been talking exclusively to GB News, thinks that European judges are going to back down and they're going to let the plane take off. And on top of that as well, she does think that people who oppose the Rwanda scheme are just snobs. What do you make of all of that? In other news as well, Boris Johnson, partygate. Yes, he's submitted his dossier of evidence. He thinks it will exonerate him completely. He'll be left completely vindicated. We'll have to wait and see. Any developments on that, we'll bring them to you as and when they drop. And yes, OK, as well, we've got the RMT. This is good news for people, OK? So the RMT union has overwhelmingly voted to stop the strike action, to take a pay deal. Is this yet another win for Rishi Sunak? And finally as well, are we a nation of shoplifters? Yes, that's right. Apparently more people than ever before are shoplifting. In fact, a lot of people have become addicted to it. Why is that? But I am asking as well whether or not you've ever just nicked anything a little bit pathetic, maybe in your youth perhaps. Get in touch with all of your views and yes, keep yourselves locked in. Big hour. gbviews at gbnews.uk is that email address. Do you think that the people who oppose the Rwanda scheme are just snobs? And yes, a little bit more light-hearted. In your youth, nothing serious, people. What is the most pathetic thing you've ever nicked? gbviews at gbnews.uk. But right now, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thanks very much indeed. The latest news headlines on GB News today. The DUP says it's going to vote against the government in this week's first parliamentary vote on the new Brexit deal. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, agreed the new Windsor framework with the EU last month, which aimed to resolve some of the concerns unionists have about the Northern Ireland Protocol. Party leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson acknowledged significant progress has been made, but said the new proposal doesn't resolve fundamental problems.
Well, I recognise the progress that has been made here, and I've said so, and I think the Prime Minister has worked hard to bring about that progress, but there are issues of concern that remain for us in terms of the application of EU law, in terms of how these arrangements will work in practice, and we have said we need greater clarity, we need reworking and change, and we'll continue to engage with the Prime Minister and the Government to secure the progress that is needed.
Boris Johnson's written defence against claims he lied to Parliament over the partygate scandal has been handed to the Privileges Committee. They'll now publish their findings on whether Mr Johnson was in contempt of Parliament and make a recommendation on any sanctions. The House of Commons will make the final decision, and a spokesperson for Boris Johnson said his position would be vindicated. The UN chief is calling on rich nations to accelerate their shift to net zero by 2040. That's after a new report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warned emissions must be halved by the mid-2030s if the world is to have any chance of limiting temperature rises to 1.5 degrees, which is a key target outlined in the Paris Agreement. The report, which Antonio Guterres branded the survival guide for humanity, says there is little time to lose. China's president has called Vladimir Putin a dear friend as the pair sat down for talks in Moscow. President Xi Jinping is in Russia on his first visit to the country since the start of the invasion of Ukraine. Downing Street said it hopes he'll urge President Putin to stop the war. Vladimir Putin says he's open to a negotiating process on Ukraine, but warned he will not accept any ultimata. Meanwhile, justice ministers from around the world are meeting in London to discuss increasing support for the International Criminal Court. On Friday, the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Russia's president on charges of war crimes. Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab says the 40 nations are united behind one cause: to hold those responsible for atrocities in Ukraine to account. President Vladimir Putin is accused of ordering the kidnapping and deportation of thousands of Ukrainian children. The Kremlin called the allegations outrageous and unacceptable. Here, the Home Secretary has told MPs she is satisfied the provisions of the government's illegal migration bill are capable of being applied compatibly with the Human Rights Convention. That comes after Suella Braverman said migrants could be sent to Rwanda by the summer. The agreement between the two countries has been expanded to include all illegal migrants, not just asylum seekers. And speaking in the House of Commons, Suella Braverman told MPs the UK will work with France to secure cross-channel cooperation, and she criticised Labour for announcing their immigration plan on Twitter.
In the last 10 days, the Prime Minister and I have secured a big deal with the French to increase cross-channel cooperation. I've presented and we've voted on measures to detain and swiftly remove illegal migrants. And this weekend, I met with refugees who have successfully been resettled in Rwanda and seen the accommodation that people will be using. What's the Labour Party done? Well, the Shadow Home Secretary's been on Twitter. She's very good on Twitter. She tweeted in the last 10 days, Labour's paltry excuse for a plan. Half of it's stuff we're already doing. The other half is their plan for open borders and unlimited migration. What I suggest they do is get off Twitter, get to Rwanda, and I'll show them how to stop the boats.
Members of the RMT in Network Rail have voted to accept an offer covering pay, jobs and conditions. Staff will receive a pay rise of between 9.2% and 14.4% and increased back pay. The union says its 20,000 members voted 76% in favour of the new deal. Secretary of Transport Mark Harper says he hopes the union give its members at train operation companies the same offer.
And I hope that the trade unions now put, the RMT now put, the fair and reasonable pay offer, a very similar pay offer, that they now put that to their members that are working for the train operating companies. They haven't had the chance to consider this pay offer, and I hope their union gives them the chance to consider it and decide whether, like their Network Rail workers, whether they want to settle this dispute as well.
And just lastly, Downing Street says it is confident the UK banking system remains safe and well after the state-backed rescue of Credit Suisse. UBS agreed to buy its Swiss rival in a deal worth more than £2.5 billion. This morning, the FTSE 100 did fall by 1%. That's its lowest level in more than 4 months. But the markets have now steadied somewhat. Shares in Credit Suisse, however, have dived by more than 60%. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
OK, welcome along, everybody. Loads to get through. Let's crack on. And we start with the latest on the government's plans to send migrants to Rwanda. Massive day, this, actually, for the Rwanda scheme. Home Secretary Suella Braverman has defended the proposals in a lively exchange in the House of Commons. She was in the Rwandan capital, Kigali, over the weekend, and you can watch an exclusive interview with her on the GB News YouTube channel, so make sure you do check that out. She sat down with Mark Wire. There's quite a lot to get stuck into here with this Rwanda scheme, because she did say that she believes, anyway, that a lot of people who disagree with it are just virtue signalling snobs, the kind of people with millions in the bank. They send their kids to private schools, so they don't see classroom sizes going up, they don't see, impact on public services, etc. Their lives aren't really touched by the day-to-day increases in migrant numbers. They don't live near a migrant hotel. Interesting as well today that it emerged that there are 369 asylum seeker hotels in England alone. I think really hammering home exactly why the government is trying to get planes to take off to Rwanda. She was saying that the people who disagree with it, they're being snobbish about Rwanda itself, and also maybe their own lives aren't touched by the realities of illegal immigration into this country. What do you make of all of that? But the other big news was that the stumbling block, arguably the final brick in the wall, actually, when it came to maybe getting this thing off the ground, was, of course, the EU judges, the European judges, I should say, sorry, not EU judges, European judges blocking at the last minute, in the dead of night, in some kind of secret office somewhere, the plans for the flights to be able to take off. Well, supposedly, they might be about to change their tune and allow these things to go ahead. Well, to get more on this big story, I am joined by Rebecca Jane, who is the Deputy Leader of UKIP. Rebecca, thank you very much. Look, I'm looking at a lot of headlines here. Euro judges set to back down on the Rwanda flights. This means that potentially we might be having lift-off. Your views?
Well, my views are that obviously Suella has been in Parliament today. She's been shouting at Labour, why on earth are you going on Twitter and discussing your plans, because I'm here in Rwanda. Well, my problem is I'm not virtue signalling, but I certainly have a problem with the Rwanda plan, and because Suella has literally shown everybody exactly why they need to come to Britain, because we're going to give you a first-class ticket to Rwanda, and it doesn't look like a deterrent to me. I've shown people at work today the accommodation and the standards of living that they will be provided for in Rwanda, and it looks absolutely lovely. In fact, actually, I think that her little tour has done nothing but damage to the whole plan, and the plan is useless anyway. It can only take about 200 people at a time, when obviously we see absolute record levels of people coming to this country. She needs to be a deterrent, not say, here, look at our beautiful new life that you can have if you try and cross the channel and make this a horrifically awful journey.
So, Rebecca,
we need to be a deterrent.
You think it's too... So you think your criticism of the Rwanda scheme would be that it's too nice and might actually encourage people to come across the channel in the hope of being sent to Rwanda, which, of course, is the opposite of what a lot of people are saying?
Precisely. I mean, the opposite, absolutely not. I mean, have you seen the accommodation that they have? Even Suella said that she wanted to talk to the interior designer who's designed these homes. So there's no deterrent in this. It looks like a really great plan for them to come. If they are saying that their lives are not great at home, obviously, which they are, then this looks like a really good alternative to me. You can go there, you can have a potentially a new lovely life. This is not a deterrent. A strong deterrent would be to stop people from getting to our shores and basically send people back to where they have obviously come from, if it is safe to do so. If not, we need to be looking at more alternatives. But this Rwanda plan is absolutely atrocious, and it's filled with problems.
So you think that it will not act as a deterrent? So what Suella Braverman is hoping, clearly, is that it does act as a deterrent. And what she's saying is, well, even if it doesn't, we'll just send more people to Rwanda, so more people will go, and that then might act as a deterrent in turn. But you think, from what you've seen, it's not a deterrent at all. In fact, it's actually quite lovely. What should they be doing then? Should they be sending people where? To the moon?
goodness knows where right now. But what I know is that actually charity begins at home, and what we need to be doing is we need to be looking after the people of the United Kingdom and helping them first before we start actually looking into these plans. Other countries need to step up, other countries need to do more. Unfortunately, right now, there's not a lot that we can do because our country is currently broken.
Well,
we don't have the education, we don't have the security systems.
Let me cut in on this because it's a really interesting point that you've led us on to, actually. There's an article today that has really, somehow, miraculously, not really actually kind of emerged as a front and centre story, but I'm trying to make it one anyway. So, apparently, private firms are absolutely raking it in off of the migrant hotel business. And it is now a business. It's its own cottage industry. And one firm managed to treble its pre-tax profits from 2.1 million to 6.3 million in the 12 months up to February 2022. So what people will do is, willy-nilly, the government will essentially contact hotels and say, here's a load of money, do you mind if this company comes in and runs it as an asylum seeker hotel? And a lot of the time, because hotels have been struggling post-pandemic, they go, well, yeah, all right. And part of me thinks fair enough, by the way, to the hoteliers, because if there's a choice between that and going out of business, then OK, all right. But there are 363 of these hotels in England, 20 in Northern Ireland, 10 in Scotland, just 10 in Scotland, lovely place, Scotland, and 2 in Wales, just 2 in Wales as well. And when it comes to the staggering amount of people there, that 363 parts of England alone will have an asylum seeker hotel. The figures are out there now. Do you think that that just exacerbates the idea that it is just snobby people who don't live anywhere, these hotels, who are keen to keep as many people here as possible, basically, and not back things like the Rwanda plan?
Well, the problem is the hotel situation. Once again, why on earth are we actually doing this plan? It's costing us £6 million a year. So, no, it's not a case of not backing the Rwanda plan for that reason. We shouldn't be putting people in hotels because, again, you know, there was an asylum seeker who was discussing it, and he was actually saying that, you know, we've got nothing to do here. We actually have to get a bus into town. It's like, for goodness sakes, you know, we're not here to provide you with a first-class life. We are supposed to be there to help people in their absolute dire straits of needs, and that is not the case here. There are multiple different companies, peoples, agencies who are profiteering off the back of this situation, and that's where it's going wrong. It's supposed to be about humanity, and it's not. It's about people trying to rake in as much cash as possible and not looking after the people of the United Kingdom. So, no, I don't think it is about virtue signalling the slightest. It's about protecting ourselves. It's about protecting our children. And the Rwanda plan for me is just an absolute smokescreen of, you know, a completely ludicrous situation that we should be using proper deterrence to actually solve this problem. And we're just all distracted with Rwanda.
Yeah, OK, I get what you mean there. I suppose what they will be hoping is because the small boats crisis, people coming over in small boats, accounted apparently for 45% of asylum applications in 2022. So clearly that has exacerbated the backlog, and if that was reduced to nil, then that is a massive decrease on the amount of pressure that we would have to do and a massive decrease on the amount of money we would have to be spending on the asylum seeker hotels. I know that you're not in favour, obviously, of the taxpayer forking out for asylum seeker hotels. I know that you're not really in favour of the money being spent in Rwanda, and you don't think it will be a deterrent. In fact, you think it might actually encourage people to take that trip. They quite like the look of Rwanda. I mean, that would be quite interesting for Gary Lineker and co to see that, wouldn't it? People there in Calais about to get on small boats, desperately trying to come to the UK in the hope of being sent to Rwanda. But there we go. So what would you do then, instead of doing what the government is doing now? What is it that you would do?
Like I keep on saying, we would absolutely stop people from getting to shore. So we would convert shipping containers into a humane facility that is equal to a high security prison, so that people are actually deterred. You're not even going to get to our shores, so why on earth would you even try? And then we would look at alternatives but we would have the Rwanda plan that they've come up with, and the accommodation style and everything else. Again, it wouldn't be something like that. It would be a safe alternative in a different country, but we wouldn't let people come to this country. We can't cope. We've had enough. We have to sort our own people out first. And then, for me personally, and it's not quite a UKIP policy, but I think that we have to have a block on all aid for the next 5 years, because we need to sort ourselves out before we can start looking at, you know, a decent plan of how to actually let people come into this country. But right now, it all has to stop, and we have to be a strong deterrent. So people from Albania, I'm sorry, but unfortunately, go back. we have to send them back to where they came from.
Yeah.
It's not appropriate, in my opinion.
Yes, I mean, a lot of people go on holiday to Albania, and I think and apparently it's absolutely beautiful. Yes, there we go. Rebecca, thank you very much. Rebecca Jane there, Deputy Leader of UKIP. Now, look, OK, of course, Rebecca's view there is to go even stronger on the deterrent. She doesn't think that Rwanda is the deterrent. In fact, it looks rather nice. So Suella Braverman, for her part, is caught between a bit of a rock and a hard place here, between making Rwanda looking like a place that we all want to go and live, and therefore you should desperately try to get to Britain illegally in the hope that we do send you to Rwanda, and actually trying to put up some kind of deterrent. That's the juggling act, isn't it, that she's got on the go at the minute. But yes, just going to emphasise again, some new figures have dropped. There are 363 asylum seeker hotels in England, 20 in Northern Ireland, 10 in Scotland, 2 in Wales. And I would be really fascinated to know, if you are in one of those areas, how do you feel about that? Because when you do hear the likes of the kind of lefty lovies that are banging on about how we're all horrible little racists and that we don't want people coming over here in small boats out of some kind of racial grounds, I actually think it's because of this. It's because in your local area now there is every chance that there is one of these hotels, and there is every chance that your money, the taxpayers' money, to the tune of around £6 million a day, is being spent on this. And is that not really why the government wants to try to get schemes like Rwanda off the ground, not simply because of a dislike of people coming across the channel? There is a huge, huge societal and economic cost to what is currently taking place. This is a huge story, and we are going to get Nigel Farage's take on the government's Rwanda plans a little later on in the show, but this seems to have been going on forever. But there are going to be fresh developments in Partygate. That's right, Boris Johnson will appear before the Privileges Committee on Wednesday to defend himself against claims that he lied to Parliament. Well, Johnson was photographed at a number of events in Downing Street that supposedly, anyway, broke the lockdown rules, but the former PM said in the Commons that lockdown rules were followed. That is obviously one of the problems here. Did he lie? Did he not lie? Well, he has submitted now his dossier of evidence. He thinks, his legal team at least think, it will exonerate him, he'll be completely vindicated. Look, to be honest with you, do you actually care anymore? Or should you feel like we care, because then we should know whether or not we were lied to in the first place? I'm joined now by GB News' Deputy Political Editor. Oh, that's the first time I've been introduced since the promotion. Tom Harwood, there we go. Tom, what is the latest?
Well, we know now this afternoon that Boris Johnson has submitted this 60-page dossier to the Privileges Committee. It's now down to that committee in terms of when they publish it. But Boris Johnson's team seem very confident that this dossier contains evidence that will exonerate Boris Johnson from the charge put before the House of Commons. And let's not forget, the charge isn't whether or not he went to a party that broke social distancing rules, or whether or not he broke COVID rules. That was, of course, decided by the Metropolitan Police last year. On one occasion, Boris Johnson did receive a fixed penalty notice for that cake around the cabinet room table in what I'm not sure many people would seem to believe is a very exciting-looking birthday party. But for that event, Boris Johnson was fined. The question, therefore, before Parliament on Wednesday is not whether or not Boris Johnson broke the rules. It's whether or not he knowingly misled Parliament in terms of saying he believed the rules were followed. Now, that is a crucial distinction, because Boris Johnson says he was acting on the advice of his senior civil servants who told him, in their view, no rules were broken. And therefore, when he said that to Parliament, he was acting in good faith based on the knowledge he had at that time. That's the case he will be making. But no doubt there'll be lots of other MPs who disagree, who said that he knew he was breaking the rules at the time, and therefore he materially misled Parliament. And that could have grave consequences.
OK, all right. Well, look, obviously Boris Johnson is going to be clinging on for dear life to his political career in that sense. I know there are strong views on either side of this. We are, frankly, going to have days to talk about it, not least because it's all kicking off on Wednesday. So I'm going to move on from that now. I'm going to move on from it and talk about some more big news that broke this afternoon, and that is regarding the rail strikes. They've been crippling this country. Rishi Sunak said he wanted to stop the boats. We were just talking about all of that. Has he stopped the strikes, Tom?
Well, it's looking like we are edging towards that position. Of course, last week we heard about the deal that had been reached between all of those different medical unions, which have now been recommended in terms of passing that pay settlement. And now the RMT, one of the most militant unions on the railways, has reached this agreement with Network Rail. And this seems to be another step forward in terms of solving some of these big issues. Now, it must be said that the government has always said that they're sort of an arm's distance facilitator of negotiations here between the employers and the unions. So unlike in the role of the health service, the government hasn't been directly negotiating here, but there always has been a sort of accusation of the unions that behind the scenes it was the government pulling the strings. And it does seem that there has been movement on both sides here in many different areas. And I would be very surprised, actually, if we didn't see more sectors sort of announcing that there have been big steps forward in negotiations, that there are settlements finally being reached, sort of one by one over the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, indeed. Well, look, I think it'll be good news, frankly, for everybody. Both sides can probably claim a win on this, and that usually means that it's a good deal. Tom, thank you very much. Tom Harwood, our deputy political editor. Right, look, loads of you have been getting in touch. I am going to go to the inbox shortly, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I was asking whether or not you think it's only snobs. I know it isn't, by the way. But you think it's only snobs who are opposing this Rwanda deal. And also, as well, so a topic that we're going to talk about later on. Apparently, we're a nation of shoplifters. Now, you little tea leaves out there. Supposedly, we're all nicking things much more than we used to do. I want to know, what is the most pathetic thing you nicked as a child? Because let's be honest, we've all done it. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Some absolute corkers in there. I'll go to those shortly. But first, much more serious matters. The DUP says that it will vote against the government in this week's first parliamentary vote on the new Brexit deal. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak agreed the new Windsor framework with the EU last month. DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson acknowledged significant progress has been made, but said the new proposed deal doesn't deal with some fundamental problems. Who better to talk about this with than the former First Minister of Northern Ireland is Baroness Arlene Foster OBE. Good grief. Arlene, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. Right, what do you make of this development then? So the DUP is going to vote against this Brexit deal, the Windsor framework. Why?
Well, first of all, the vote on Wednesday is actually quite a technical vote. It's a technical vote on a statutory instrument on the stormont brake. That's part of the Windsor framework, you might recall. This is quite complicated, but I think it is important to explain why this is important. The Prime Minister said he would give members of Parliament a vote on the Windsor framework. He has now turned this vote on a statutory instrument in Westminster into a vote on the Windsor framework. As such, the DUP feel that they cannot vote in favour of this statutory instrument because they haven't had clarity as to how the stormont brake is going to work. And I would imagine that most people would like to have clarity on how something works before they vote on it.
OK, all right, but how damaging is this really going to be for the government, do you think? Is Rishi just going to plough ahead anyway, regardless?
Well, I think he has the numbers in Parliament if he wants to plough ahead, despite the fact that the Foreign Secretary and others had said that they wouldn't go ahead unless the DUP were content with the deal. But we've already been briefed that the Foreign Secretary is meeting with Maros Sefcovic, who's the Vice President of the European Commission, on Friday. So I would imagine that they will sign off the deal on Friday. They won't have the support of the Democratic Unionist Party. It'll be interesting to find out tomorrow, Patrick, whether they have the support of members of the ERG, who are just tomorrow morning releasing what they believe is their legal opinion on the Windsor framework. So that comes out tomorrow morning as well. So we'll have to watch this space in relation to what they're going to say about all of that.
OK, look, Arlene, thank you very much, as ever. That is Arlene Foster there, Baroness Arlene Foster OBE. I'm sorry, Arlene, who is, of course, the former First Minister of Northern Ireland, just explaining why the DUP are going to vote against this particular element of the Brexit deal, why it matters, what it means for the government, etc. So we've got loads more coming your way. I'm loving some of the emails coming in, by the way, of some of the most pathetic things that you nicked as a child. It's emerged that apparently we are now a nation of shoplifters. A new report suggests that we are nicking things even more than we used to do in the past. And, yeah, I'm going to reveal all of these when I come back, but some brilliant ones in there, so keep them coming. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I have got a lot more on the way. We could apparently be on the brink of another global banking crisis. I will have more on that shortly, but I do promise you that at some point we will endeavour to keep it light here on this show. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone.
My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Right, OK, welcome back. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch. GBviews at gbnews.uk. I have been asking what is the most pathetic thing that you've ever stolen from the shops, because apparently we are now a nation of shoplifters. New figures suggest that we are nicking things more than ever before, but I thought I'd put a slightly light-hearted spin on it. Kirsty says that when her stepson was about 10, he stole a Freddo bar from the shop, which cost 10p. Kirsty, there's no really uplifting message here other than the fact that you did the right thing, clearly, which is to take him back to the shop, make him apologise and pay for it, and he's never stolen anything again. Thanks for your email, Kirsty, but my kind of email is more like this, from a guy called Sean. Good afternoon. I nicked a potato gun when I was at school and I shot somebody in the eye with it. Good stuff, Sean, whose surname sounds a lot like Connery, which would have made him the worst James Bond character in history. Good afternoon. I haven't stolen in my adult life, but when I was younger, I did steal a lottery ticket from behind the counter, although it never won. Yeah, all right. I just want your pathetic shoplifting stories, if that's OK, really. Anyway, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Keep them coming in. We have got loads more as well. Downing Street, though. Moving on. And the Bank of England are insisting the UK's banking system remains safe and sound, which should be reassuring for us all, because this followed on from this morning as European bank shares dropped sharply again in the wake of the rescue of troubled bank Credit Suisse by rivals UBS. Now, markets in London have steadied since, but it follows a very turbulent 10 days for money markets and banks across the globe following the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank in the US. He talks to me about, well, the potential global crisis. We'll have to wait and see about all of that. But something else as well that I think will pique your interest is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. OK, Liam, so bit on banks, bit on something else. Hit me with the banks stuff
No
first.
real update, if I'm honest, Patrick, from when we spoke earlier this afternoon.
Credit Suisse is one of the world's most important banks, or was. It was a top 30 bank, systemically important. Such is the turmoil that was sparked when that Silicon Valley Bank, a much, much smaller bank, failed in the US a couple of weeks ago. The UK arm of that, of course, was taken over under Bank of England supervision by HSBC, a British bank. But since then, there's been jitters across the world, and one of the really big thoroughbred banks of the world has now, after 150, 160 years in existence, been wiped out. Its depositors, its accounts have been taken over by its long-standing rival in Switzerland, UBS. So you've now got an absolute mega bank, a bank whose balance sheet is even bigger than the country in which it resides. And Switzerland is not a particularly small economy.
No, it's just mad, isn't it? Yeah, OK, all right. I know we touched on a little bit earlier about us not necessarily getting too ahead of ourselves and thinking that we're staring down the barrel of a global economic crash.
No, we're nowhere near, at this point, the 2008 financial crisis. Yeah. We mustn't spread panic as journalists. What I would say, though, is that the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, a lot of other important central banks over the weekend, they announced what they call a swap facility. That's basically a statement of intent to global financial markets and investors who fancy getting a bit naughty, saying, look, us central banks are going to stand together. We're going to, quickly give each other money in times of distress. We're going to coordinate our response, so back off, because we are in charge. OK, now, very quickly, by the way, because I'm going to get shouted at if I'm not already, but I've stopped caring at this point, actually. Doncaster, what's happening? So I was up in Doncaster as soon as the budget was finished, and I did my video wall and I spoke to various presenters. I then got on a train and went to Doncaster, and I spent Thursday night and Friday in Doncaster, and I spoke to a lot of people about the closure of Doncaster Airport, a very long-standing, it used to be a big RAF base. It's been a civilian airport since 2005. A lot of promise. There's a lot of discontent that what is now a city, Doncaster, the airport, has been closed. And tomorrow I'm going to bring GB News viewers and listeners a special report on Doncaster Airport and the local campaign to save it, which is gathering pace. Good stuff. We love a campaign. Right, more on that will be coming very shortly. Liam, thank you very much. Liam Halligan there, our economics and business editor, with On the Money. Keep your emails coming in about the most pathetic thing you nicked as a child. A grape is an early contender for a victor here from Gary. Thank you very much. I have to admit to nicking my parents' cigs and alcohol. There you go, Gaynor. Clearly a lady after my own heart there. Good stuff. Right, there's loads more to come in today's show. With Nicola Sturgeon's time as the SNP leader almost over and her husband stepping down as their chief executive, we'll get an expert take on SNP turmoil. Look, I'm basically going to condense that and say it's SNP madness north of the border, and we'll get stuck right into it. Is Donald Trump really about to be arrested? He believes that he might be taken away in handcuffs. I'll be asking a leading Republican, but first, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The headlines this hour. The DUP says it'll vote against the government in this week's first parliamentary vote on the new Brexit deal. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak agreed the new Windsor framework with the EU last month. It aims to resolve some of the concerns unionists hold around the Northern Ireland Protocol. Party leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson acknowledged significant progress has been made, but said the new proposed deal doesn't cover some fundamental problems. Members of the RMT at Network Rail have voted to accept an offer covering pay, jobs and conditions. Staff will receive a pay rise of between 9.2% and 14.4% and increased back pay. The union says its 20,000 members voted 76% in favour of the new deal. China's president has called Vladimir Putin a dear friend as they both sat down to talk in Moscow. President Xi Jinping is in Russia on his first visit to the country since the start of the invasion in Ukraine. Downing Street said it hoped President Xi would urge President Putin to stop the war. Vladimir Putin says he's open to negotiating on Ukraine, but warned he wouldn't accept any ultimata. The UN chief is calling on rich nations to urgently accelerate their shift to net zero by 2040. That's after a new report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warned emissions must be halved by the mid-2030s if the world is to have any chance of limiting temperature rises to 1.5 degrees. And that's a key target from the Paris Agreement. The report, which Antonio Guterres has branded the survival guide for humanity, says there is little time to lose. Those are your latest news headlines. I'm back at the top of the hour. Now, more Patrick.
All right, well, some of you might be wondering why I've been asking you to get in touch with the most pathetic things that you've nicked as a child, OK? GBviews at gbnews.uk. A, wanted to lighten the show up a little bit, but also B, because of this story. We were once described as a nation of shopkeepers. But experts are now claiming that Britain is a nation of shoplifters. That's right, shoppers are reportedly resorting to nicking everyday essentials from the shelves. Now, they partly are saying, well, this is to keep their families going after the steep price rises over the past year, but experts actually warn that people are becoming addicted to it and getting a shoplifting high. So I want to know what's behind the thieving, frankly. I also just want to go now quickly to a couple of your points here. I'm not going to name people on this, just in case the old bill come for you years after the event, OK? So thank you very much for everyone who's been getting in touch. I shamefully had a thing for nicking stationery when I was 9 years old, but when I was 10, I moved up to nicking album covers with no records in them. Yeah, that is weird. That is a bit weird. To my eternal shame, separate email now, this individual says that they purchased £70 of ice cream and champagne for the kids. I've got a lot of questions here. Can I be your kid, maybe, if that's on the go? But there we are. And they nicked a shovel spoon from Harrods. So that says a lot about you, that email. A lot about you. Just one more quick one here. Patrick, when I was 10, I did a paper round. I stole a Cadbury's cream egg and put it in my back pocket, but I was wearing skinny jeans, so it was visible. I still feel bad. 45 years ago, and it melted anyway. So anyway, there we go. But I want to know whether or not people can actually wean themselves off shoplifting and why they get a buzz out of it. I'm joined now by psychotherapist Emma Kenny. Emma, great stuff. Great to have you on the show. So people are becoming addicted to shoplifting. Why?
Well, people always have shoplifted. Potentially, we've got better at figuring out when they do. I mean, only one out of 150 people ever get caught for shoplifting. Oh. But I guess the cost of living certainly is going to be part of it. Higher rates of dependency, because if you're a drug user, you're going to need to steal to kind of feed your habit. Also, yeah, there is a high to some degree. So people get a dopamine kick when they steal. And obviously, when you get away with it, there's no reinforcement and consequences. So that encourages you to do more. But also, the very fact that a lot of people don't see commercial stealing in the same way in context as they would a home invasion, for example, because they contextualise that as, well, they're insured and they're big business. So that's one of the mental disassociations that people make.
Yeah, indeed. No, and I've seen some really brazen shoplifting things. I was in Boots once and someone literally, the automatic doors open, they just came in, the rucksack was open and they just swept a load of the kind of like aftershave packs that you can get, you know, those kind of pamper packs. They just swept them all into a bag and off, and it was done in about 10 seconds and that was it. So it is actually quite easy for people to do, really. But do people get some kind of proper psychological buzz out of it? Is there a bit of that? Not just the people who are doing it for quotes-unquote necessity?
Yeah, so you've got two levels there. So you've got people who are genuinely kleptomaniacs. So that means that they have a psychological classification where they just cannot help themselves. But you also have people who basically enjoy the kick that they get. Like anything, like drinking, like smoking, like gambling. It enables you to feel that you've got this immediate buzz. So dopamine is released in that way. And that means that unless you're getting some kind of negativity response, you're not going to necessarily stop. So certainly we see that there is a psychological issue there. Also, people with OCD, there is this particular syndrome of that, very rare, but particular syndrome where people are addicted to the ritual of stealing. So certainly there can be psychological conditions that lead to it. I think there's still a lot of reasoning that people do it because they feel that they want to get away with something because they haven't necessarily got the economy. So it's not necessarily about the fact that they can't pay for it, it's that they can get away with it. And the truth is, humans like that. I mean, I've never met a human yet who doesn't like thinking that they can get one over on something. It's not because they're a nasty, callous individual. It's just that sense of, oh, I got away with it. Another big reason why there's an increase is self-service tills. I mean, it's very easy to get away with stealing. So the consequence of that is you get to steal, and also, is the security guard going to run after you? Because they're risking a lot of themselves to do that, and they're not getting paid enough. So again, the feedback and response isn't that big for the consequences.
There are very much serious elements to this story. Of course, people shouldn't be nicking stuff, and security guards, especially in the days of people carrying knives everywhere you go, you know, security guards don't want to get involved. And people do suffer. They think it's a victimless crime because, oh, you nicked something from Tesco, or Tesco's is insured. Yeah, all right, I get that, but it's not really the point, is it? And we do have law and order, or at least we should do in this country. But at the same time as well, though, there are interesting, fascinating elements to it, like quite a lot of wealthy people actually nicking just for some kind of psychological rush, as you said, you know, kind of person who might nick some fig chutney from Waitrose. But Emma, thank you very, very much. Emma Kenny there is a psychotherapist. Great stuff. Yeah, loads of you getting in touch here on the most pathetic thing you nicked when you were a kid. This is actually a good contender, this, from Richard. In 1935, my dad was aged 10. He stole a turnip from a field, but the local policeman was hiding in the hedge and caught him. It sounds like the start of a really bad joke, this. Anyway, he was sent to a magistrate's court and fined back in the day when law and order ruled. He'd get away with that turnip these days, wouldn't he? Or he'd just stab the policeman, I suppose. Loads of you getting in touch. It is actually quite fascinating as well, some of these ones that you've nicked. I didn't realise that so many of our viewers, like Pam, I'll name you Pam, because you're a disgrace. She nicked a 20p Popper Point pencil from W.H. Smith's and got arrested and cautioned. Grief. I mean, nowadays, someone could break into your house and assault your nan and the police wouldn't rock up, so there we go. Anyway, moving on. Today is International Happiness Day. That's right. Yes. No, honestly, it really is. Let me know what makes you happy, people, OK? We are going to do that very, very shortly. I'm Patrick Christys and this is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
OK, welcome back. Let's get an extraordinary story now involving Donald Trump, who said that he's going to be arrested this week. Trump made the comment on his Truth social platform on Saturday, and the case surrounds hush money payments he allegedly made to porn star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 presidential election. So it quite literally has it all, this story, doesn't it? But I am joined now by Greg Swenson, who's the chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. Greg, thank you very much. Will Donald Trump be arrested and led away in handcuffs?
I don't think so.
Right.
Not likely. He very well could be indicted, but there's a difference between being indicted and having your lawyers make some arrangements and being walked off in handcuffs. I think he would love to be arrested. It would be a disgrace for the New York DA, for Alvin Bragg, and the Democratic machinery. But it's already a disgrace because the case has absolutely no merit. I mean, they've tried to tie this payment into campaign finance violations. The feds, the Justice Department turned it down because they didn't think there was any merit to it. Alvin Bragg's predecessor, Cyrus Vance Jr., he turned it down, said there was no merit for it. So, Bragg basically ran as a get Trump candidate. That was his whole campaign strategy. The progressive left, especially in New York, who just really hate Trump, want him to do this. So he finally buckled and went ahead and did it.
But surely this would just galvanise anyone who dislikes Joe Biden and quite likes Donald Trump, or indeed just the Republican Party. It would play into that narrative, though, wouldn't it?
No doubt about it. I mean, I think the Democrats understand. They don't want to run against Ron DeSantis in the general election. So they'll do anything to elevate Trump. After the Mar-a-Lago raid, Trump's numbers over DeSantis went from +9 to +39.
Wow.
So, he had an enormous pickup from Mar-a-Lago. They know that's coming, so that's why they're going through with this ridiculous case, which would never survive on appeal.
So you think that this is seriously a chance to boost Trump in the polls, to make it more likely that he runs again as the Republican presidential candidate, which makes it more likely that the Democrats will win?
Absolutely. Because there's no basis for this case. They know they can't win the case.
Right.
And they've had 6 years of indictments and impeachments and lawsuits and investigations, none of which have worked. I would argue if you don't like Trump, then use the ballot box. That's the proper way to win elections, not to chase your opponents with the criminal justice system. So, it's really atrocious that they're doing it. But I think they know it's worth it if they can elevate Trump and ensure that he wins the nomination.
And we're essentially on the clock, aren't we, when it comes to whether or not Trump is going to get indicted, arrested, whatever. He said tomorrow, he thinks.
Right. He said tomorrow. I don't know where he gets that information, but there are a lot of indicators that the indictment is pending, and it could very well be this week.
Greg, thank you very much. As ever, appreciate you coming in for us as well. That is Greg Swenson there, who's the chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. Now, moving on. Are you concerned about sex education classes at your kids' schools? Because last month, lessons at a school on the Isle of Man were suspended after a drag queen told 11-year-olds that there were 73 genders. And now a mother has claimed her transgender teenage daughter, who now identifies as a boy, was influenced by sex education lessons. And this is really the bit that I'm keen to drill down on, people, because she told The Telegraph that she thinks that gender dysphoria is the new anorexia for girls. And I think this is going to be of vital importance to anyone out there watching now who's got kids or thinking of having kids. Joining me is Helen Joyce, who's the director of the advocacy at Sex Matters. Is gender dysphoria the new anorexia for girls?
In part, yes. Until about 10 years ago, there weren't really teenage girls who said that they identified as boys or as anything else. It wasn't something that affected teenage girls, and now that's the group that it affects most. We also know that's a group that's prone to social contagion, not just anorexia, but cutting and self-harming. These things are suggested in friendship groups. They're suggested in online forums. Both of those things are true for gender dysphoria, but unfortunately, gender dysphoria is also taught in schools. They don't mean to be teaching it, but when they tell children that what makes you a boy or a girl is how you feel, and you should examine yourself and your feelings and your behaviours and decide whether you're a boy or a girl based on that, and that it's nothing to do with your biology, they are teaching children who feel ill at ease in their bodies for maybe other reasons, for example, like being autistic spectrum or, just being unusual, just being sad, lonely, anything. They're teaching those children that the solution may be something to do with this nebulous idea of gender. We've never seen this before, that basically a socially created illness is being sold in schools by teachers, as well as by peer groups, as well as by the medical profession, as well as on online sites where children congregate. So we're seeing really a perfect storm of spreading this idea.
That is really fascinating and, for want of a better phrase, entirely man-made in your view.
Yeah, I do think so. I think there are people who would feel ill at ease in their bodies anyway without it being suggested to them, but far fewer than we are seeing now. And the figures and the demography, this rise of teenage girls is so suggestive of a social contagion.
Well, and I just really want to drill down in this because look, I obviously was never a teenage girl, although these days, presumably, I could just cosplay as one and make loads of money on social media, but there we go. But yes, they are, in your view, or in terms of just evidence, I suppose, more susceptible to social trends. So, a variety of different things. And anorexia, I believe, was a massive trend, probably is still a huge problem with teenage girls, I would have thought. And the concern is that gender dysphoria, being taught that maybe they were born into the wrong body, is dropped into their minds at a very vulnerable age by a school system that thinks it might be doing them a favour and be being nice, is then backed up by a medical community, backed up by social media, backed up by a lot of people who think that people should be cancelled if they don't think that that is the right view, and potentially even backed up by things like the fashion industry, which now appears to be literally advertising. I saw an advert on the Tube the other day for someone who'd had a double mastectomy, for example. So you think it is a perfect storm for young girls, and maybe parents out there should be watching and just thinking, look, your daughter could be vulnerable here.
Absolutely. And I don't think that parents can solve this on their own, because unfortunately, by the time you realise that your child is being caught up in this, that child has already spent months basically self-indoctrinating online and with friendship groups. And the things that you say to your child will sound like negativity, rejecting them, but also like you're backward and bigoted. So when you say things like, look, there are only two sexes, your child isn't primed to hear you. Your child is primed to hear, you're a girl, you must stay in the kitchen, girls can never achieve anything. You know, they don't hear what you're actually saying. They hear what they've been told people, older people who are backward people, are about to say.
Have you seen some of those videos online as well? There's a guy who I won't name who sits there, stares straight down the camera and goes, "Your parents are wrong. You need to go no contact with your parents." Excuse me? Are you joking? And you're charging money as well for vulnerable children to be able to talk to you in a one-on-one sense. I think there's a name for those kind of people, but I wouldn't possibly dare to say it on national television just yet. Look, I am pressed for time, but I'm very glad that you came on, because I think a lot of people will get a lot out of that, actually, and they should be very concerned about, well, a lot, but especially the way that their daughters are maybe being taught about this and gender dysphoria in schools. Helen, thank you very, very much. Helen Joyce there, who's Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters. Right, OK, look, that was a very heavy topic, but it was important. It's been quite a heavy news day today, so I thought we'd lighten it up a little bit. It is International Day of Happiness today, although you wouldn't know it, would you? But it's International Day of Happiness, and the day aims to create a happier and kinder world by encouraging people to adopt simple, daily practices which will inspire joy. And with the state of the world at the moment, I decided to see if the increasingly popular practice of laughing yoga might bring me some happiness. And I have got a laughing yoga expert joining me right now. It's Lotte Mickelson, who has over 20 years' experience. Right then, OK, thank you very much. What is laughing yoga?
Oh, thank you so much for asking, Patrick. And thank you so much for having me here. Laughter yoga is just a way of laughing where you're not relying on jokes and comedy and even having a great sense of humor. And if you think about it, all of this is what sometimes makes people stop laughing, because not everybody has the same sense of humor. And we can still laugh without it. And, you know, it's Happiness Day, just like you say. And the thing is, we don't laugh because we're happy. We're happy because we laugh. Oh, we don't. Oh,
this is
when
great.
You get it wrong, what can you do except laugh at yourself?
I am so glad I've met you. This is fantastic. So how does it work? What do you do? Do you sit in a room and just laugh? Do you sit in a room and just laugh to each other? What is it?
Well, you do some exercises maybe, but I also have groups where I phone up and we laugh just 5 or 10 minutes, just laughing, no talking, just laughing. But we also do exercises because that's what helps us do it in the morning, just like you see in the video. So, for example, in the morning, you'd wake up, maybe walk past a mirror on the way to your bathroom. And when you look in the mirror, just go, It's not real laugh at that time, but you know what? We kick off that joy cocktail And, instead of going shoplifting maybe to get that kick, do some laughter instead.
So the theory is then that by essentially forcing yourself to laugh, it just makes you happy.
Yeah, you release a joy cocktail, which is endorphins, our happy chemical, serotonin, our natural antidepressant, dopamine, which motivates and drives us, and also oxytocin, our love hormone. So all these chemicals just flood our body when we're laughing, even when it's without having any particular reason, like jokes and other people to make us laugh. It's about tapping into that and doing it for ourselves, because it's so healthy for us, and both physically and mentally and emotionally healthy.
Great stuff.
And if it doesn't work for you to go ha 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 ha, just flush your head. Like you flush your teeth.
Oh, I love this. I love this. Look, thank you very much, Lotte. I'm gonna have to get going. It's too much fun for one segment here. But Lotte Mikkelsen, who has over 20 years' experience in laughing yoga. Just Google it. She is the laughter yoga expert. Hey, why not? Brought a smile to my face. Anyway, this is the best place, moving on, for coverage of the government's plans to end the migrant crisis. Very soon, I will be telling you, and asking him as well, what Nigel Farage thinks about sending people to Rwanda. I'm Patrick Christys, and join me and Nigel Farage on GB News in a matter of seconds.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive, because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, hello everybody, it's just gone 5 o'clock. I'm Patrick Christys and this is GB News. I've got a big hour coming your way, okay, because It's been a massive day for the Rwanda deal. We all thought it would never take off, but apparently it might be about to actually lift off. Suella Braverman has been in Rwanda, and the developments are that she thinks that those pesky European judges are going to back down and, frankly, allow the flights to take off. She also thinks that people who oppose the deal are actually just virtue signalling snobs. What do you make of that? I will have Nigel Farage with me in a matter of moments to talk about that, but it is going to be an extra big hour for news, people, because Dominic Raab is talking live, and we'll be taking that in about 25 minutes' time. There's an update on whether or not Vladimir Putin is going to be arrested by the international community, so make sure you stay tuned for that. I'll have more detail coming your way shortly. Big hour, ladies and gents. Be there. Yeah, get your emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Do you think that those people who oppose the Rwanda migrant plan are actually just out-of-touch snobs? I want to know what you think about all of that. And yes, I have been asking, in light of the fact that we are now supposedly a nation of shoplifters, not shopkeepers, what is the most ridiculous, pathetic thing you ever stole as a child? Some corkers in there. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Get them coming in. But now, though, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Good evening to you. The news at just after 5 o'clock is that the DUP says it's going to vote against the government in this week's first parliamentary vote on the new Brexit deal. The Prime Minister agreed the new Windsor framework with the EU last month, and it aimed to resolve some of the concerns unionists had about the Northern Ireland Protocol. Well, party leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson acknowledged significant progress has been made, but said the new proposal doesn't resolve fundamental problems.
Well, I recognise the progress that has been made here, and I've said so, and I think the Prime Minister has worked hard to bring about that progress, but there are issues of concern that remain for us in terms of the application of EU law, in terms of how these arrangements will work in practice, and we have said we need greater clarity, we need reworking and change, and we'll continue to engage with the Prime Minister and the Government to secure the progress that is needed.
Boris Johnson's defence against claims he lied to Parliament over the partygate scandal has been handed to the Privileges Committee. They're going to publish their findings on whether Mr Johnson was in contempt of Parliament and then make a recommendation on any sanctions. The House of Commons will make the final decision. A spokesperson for Boris Johnson said his position would be vindicated. The UN chief is calling on rich nations to accelerate their shift to net zero by 2040. That's after a new report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warned emissions must be halved by the mid-2030s if the world is to have any chance of limiting temperature rises to 1.5 degrees, a key target outlined in the Paris Agreement. The report, which Antonio Guterres has branded the survival guide for humanity, says there's little time to lose. China's president has called Vladimir Putin a dear friend as the pair sat down for talks in Moscow. President Xi Jinping is in Russia on his first visit to the country since the start of the invasion of Ukraine. Downing Street said it hopes it'll urge the president to stop the war. Vladimir Putin says he is open to negotiating, but warned he wouldn't accept any ultimata. Meanwhile, justice ministers from around the world are meeting in London to discuss increasing support for the International Criminal Court. On Friday, the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Russia's president on charges of war crimes. The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, said the 40 nations are united behind one cause: to hold those responsible for atrocities in Ukraine to account. President Vladimir Putin is accused of ordering the kidnapping and deportation of thousands of Ukrainian children. The Kremlin's called the allegations outrageous and unacceptable. Here, the Home Secretary has told MPs she's satisfied the provisions of the government's illegal migration bill are capable of being compatibly applied to the Human Rights Convention. It comes after Suella Braverman said migrants could be sent to Rwanda by the summer. The agreement between the two countries has been expanded to include all illegal migrants and not just asylum seekers. Speaking in the House of Commons, Suella Braverman told MPs the UK will now work with France to secure cross-channel cooperation, and she criticised Labour for announcing their immigration policy on Twitter.
Shadow Home Secretary's been on Twitter. She's very good on Twitter. She tweeted in the last 10 days, Labour's paltry excuse for a plan. Half of it's stuff we're already doing. The other half is their plan for open borders and unlimited migration. What I suggest they do is get off Twitter, get to Rwanda, and I'll show them how to stop the boats.
Members of the RMT network in Network Rail have voted to accept an offer covering pay, jobs and conditions. Staff are going to receive a pay rise of between 9.2% and 14.4% and increased back pay. The union says its 20,000 members voted 76% in favour of the new deal. Secretary of Transport Mark Harper says he hopes the union gives its members at train operation companies the same offer.
And I hope that the trade unions now put, the RMT now put, the fair and reasonable pay offer, a very similar pay offer, that they now put that to their members that are working for the train operating companies. They haven't had the chance to consider this pay offer, and I hope their union gives them the chance to consider it and decide whether, like their Network Rail workers, whether they want to settle this dispute as well.
Downing Street says it's confident the UK banking system remains safe and well after the state-backed rescue of the bank Credit Suisse. UBS agreed to buy its Swiss rival in a deal worth more than £2.5 billion. Well, this morning, in reaction, the FTSE 100 fell by 1% to its lowest level in more than 4 months. But the markets have now steadied somewhat. Shares in Credit Suisse, however, have dived by more than 60% today. That's your latest news. I'm back in half an hour with headlines. See you then.
All right, ladies and gents, loads to get through. Let's get cracking. And we start with the latest on the government's plans to send migrants to Rwanda. Home Secretary Suella Braverman has defended the proposals. It was a lively exchange in the House of Commons earlier, but it's been a big day for the Rwanda scheme because Braverman was actually in the Rwandan capital, Kigali, over the weekend. We've got an exclusive interview with her and our very own Mark White. That's available on our YouTube channel. Make sure you check that out. But Braverman basically thinks that she might have been able to get those European judges to back down and, well, allow the flights to take off, which was seen as maybe the final brick in the wall when it comes to getting the illegal migration bill, for want of a better phrase, off the ground. Also, she has come out swinging, saying that people who oppose the deportation scheme to Rwanda or processing scheme to Rwanda are basically out-of-touch lefty snobs. Let's find out now what GB News' presenter Nigel Farage makes of it all. Nigel is with me. Yes, there he is. Good stuff. OK, well, look, what do you make of the latest developments when it comes to Suella Braverman's migrant Rwanda push? The Euro judge is set to back down. Do you believe that?
I believe it when I see it. You know, I don't know. I mean, let's face it, over the course of the last 3 years, we've heard this government tell us again and again that they'd found a solution to the boats crossing the English Channel, to all these young, undocumented males coming into our country. And thus far, all we've seen are the numbers increase. So look, you know, let's hope she's right. Let's hope the judges in Strasbourg relent. Although I have to say, as a Brexiteer, I don't really want judges in Strasbourg having any say over our border, migration and deportation policy. We're getting a lot of optimism from Suella Braverman. Well, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating.
Yeah, the other element to it that she said to Mark White was about the fact that some of the people who oppose the Rwanda deal, they've not been to Rwanda themselves, and that actually they're quite snobbish and that their own lives aren't impacted as a result of, well, frankly, mass immigration as a whole.
Well, yeah.
Argue, but illegal migration. Go on, your views, Nigel.
Yeah, look, you know, generally what you find is that mass migration, rising population, the people it hits the worst in our society are those who are the poorest. You know, generally, people living in £4 million homes in Chelsea don't have too much of a problem with this because it just means they get cheaper staff to work in their kitchens. But even if the Rwanda plan by this summer started to work, bear this in mind. We already have a minimum of 450 hotels around the country that have been filled. They're getting on for 60,000 young men in these hotels. And look where I am now. I'm at Scampton, where the former Dam Busters base is about to become a migrant centre. We're going to do our damnedest to stop it. So even if Rwanda kicks in this summer, we already have on our shores a massive, expensive existing problem.
And just very finally, Nigel, because I know you've got a fantastic show to prepare for, and it will be great and fantastically well viewed as well, because it's such an important topic. But when it comes to the latest polling data, Matt Goodwin put out a poll which appeared to show that just 16% of people strongly disagree with the government's illegal migration bill. But you wouldn't know that looking at Twitter, would you? How out of touch do you reckon social media is to real life?
I tell you what, I'd love Gary Lineker to come to Scampton today, to come and knock on doors in the street of this village. And I think you'd find out that Lineker, his podcast pals and his mates at the BBC are a very small minority. And yes, probably a fifth of the country think what's going on is acceptable. There is a huge silent majority out there whose voice has not yet fully been heard. And we at GB News are going to give them every chance to do that.
Good stuff. Nigel Farage will be live and unleashed as well from Scampton later on this evening. Thank you very much, Nigel. Great stuff as ever. Make sure you tune into that, people, OK? It will be great. Now, look, Nigel did raise a point there about the silent majority of people. And, yeah, the latest polling data that I have seen shows that 52% of people in the country, 52% of people either strongly support or just support the government's plan to, A, get the Rwanda flights off the ground, but also, B, ban people who try to illegally enter the UK from ever being able to apply for asylum again. So realistically, what that means is they support the government's illegal migration bill. That was 52% of that poll that took place there. Just 16% strongly disagree with it. So there is a massive disconnect between some people with massive followings on Twitter, for example, and, you could argue, the silent majority. Well, one of the key points that's emerged from Suella Braverman's visit to Rwanda is this. If Rwanda is such a great place to be sent to, as our Home Secretary claims, how can the policy also act as a deterrent? She's in a rock and a hard place, isn't she, Suella, bless her, because she's out there saying, well, look, this is a real deterrent. And then at the same time, she's saying, look at this lovely place. I want to get the name for whoever did the interior design on this place that we're sending these people. So it is a bit of a sticky wicket for her. But joining me now to give their thoughts is Steve Valdez-Simmons, who's Refugee and Migrant Rights Programme Director at Amnesty UK. And I'm joined as well by Jeremy Hutton, who is a researcher at Migration Watch. I will start with you, Steve, if that's all right. Look, is Rwanda a deterrent or not? Because from what I can see, it looks lovely.
Well, thus far it clearly isn't a deterrent, and I don't expect it to be a deterrent, not because it is a lovely place. Amnesty has been following this country for many years. It has a shocking human rights abuse. It has a totalitarian regime with a president who supposedly has polling results of 99% favourability in elections, and a regime that is currently engaged in stoking, if not actively involved, in refugee-producing conflict in East DRC, which it has been shockingly engaged in for years and decades.
OK, all right. I'll come back to you, Steve, obviously, on that. But, Jeremy, I'll bring you in now, because I was actually quite fascinated to learn that, I mean, Tony Blair was talking about a very similar scheme in Rwanda. And, in fact, the EU have already sent people over to Rwanda. I don't remember hearing too much of a clamour about all of that. It's just bad when we do it, is it?
Exactly. It seems to me that this is a case of quite a few countries are interested in these kinds of schemes. They're just trying to see if the UK can pull it off. And ultimately, we're facing a global situation where immigration levels are pretty much unprecedented. There's a lot of people around the world who want to leave their country and want to emigrate somewhere better. And if we don't do something about it, then the numbers that we've seen in recent years will, well, they could pale in comparison to the future numbers that will come.
OK, all right. Steve, I'll bring you back in now. Look, now, the cynic in me, potentially, Steve, would say that actually, as long as people are crossing the channel and as long as people are risking their lives and as long as it can be told that they're going to be deported to some kind of human rights hellhole, then charities like Amnesty can do rather well with donations. But if that isn't the case, and actually they're being sent somewhere quite nice and it's quite a good policy and it also acts as a deterrent to stop people coming across the channel and basically everyone's a winner, then Amnesty doesn't really have anything to live for in the UK when it comes to the channel. So actually, are you just pumping out negativity frankly, to keep yourself in business?
No. Amnesty's been in business for decades, long before this was ever imagined by the present government, or indeed similar schemes imagined by previous governments. There's plenty of human rights work to be done both in the UK and elsewhere in the world, and quite frankly, Amnesty would much prefer to focus on that than have to be addressing such a dreadful policy by what could be and should be a country that leads on human rights respect, rather than leaps for the gutter and encourages other countries to do likewise.
OK, how do you respond to that, Jeremy? Steve thinks that we're leaping for the gutter here.
I think that's a ridiculous thing to say, to be honest. The policy of groups such as Amnesty, maybe not Amnesty in particular, but certainly the open borders-ish groups, seems to be of more safe and legal routes from everywhere in the world in unlimited quantities and with no end. And I think when you look at how many people came to the UK illegally last year and claimed asylum, having come illegally, where do you draw the line? Is 45,000 not enough? Should we be taking in 100,000 a year? You've got to draw a line in the sand somewhere, and if we don't draw it now, the numbers are only going to keep getting higher and higher and higher.
OK, Steve, how would you respond to the charge that a lot of people who disagree with the Rwanda scheme or the government's illegal migration bill as a whole are just very loud, virtue signalling people who actually are out of touch with the reality of the country? Because the opinion polling would appear to suggest that that is the case.
Well, to be frank, I'm as loud as I'm permitted to be. I don't have a TV station to make my views known. I rely upon invitations such as yours to share them, and I will do so if I'm given the opportunity. Frankly, I'm concerned that much of the noise generated much by the government, which has so much more opportunity to make noise than Amnesty or anyone that I might support does, is detracting from very serious things, not least. Let's, for example, take the legislation that is currently being proposed by the government that you say is largely supported by the British people, by perhaps a small majority. Do they know, for example, that that very bill would mean that a British person trafficked into this country, or a British person who was born to someone trafficked into this country, would be deprived of their citizenship for that and permanently excluded from their own country? Do they know that? No, because we have so much nonsense and noise by the government over trying to do something which frankly is disgraceful in many ways, not least the way I've just described. And it's very difficult for people like I to have sufficient voice to be able to displace that, but I'll keep trying.
Well, there you go. And for what it's worth, Steve, you know, we might disagree on a lot of stuff, but I'm very glad that you do come on and talk about it, because it enables us to have debates like this. And so we are very grateful for you coming on. I'm going to lob it over to you, Jeremy. Do you think the British public fully understand this? Do you think that if they knew more detail on it, as Steve was saying, that they will be more opposed to it all?
Ultimately, what the public are sick of seeing is increased numbers, increased burdens on their local communities, and the government trotting out plans year after year after year that ultimately do nothing to address the scale of the challenge. This is the first time the government have actually come up with a plan that might actually create the sufficient levels of deterrence to stop illegal immigration into the UK, or at least significantly reduce it, and then do something about it as well. I think that's what people care about. They might not know the specific ins and outs of every single line in the reasonably long bill, but they certainly seem to agree with the gist of it, and that's what most polling shows.
OK, all right, look, both of you, thank you very, very much. Great stuff. That is, of course, Steve Valdez-Simmons there, who's Refugee and Migrant Rights Programme Director for Amnesty UK, and Jeremy Hudson, who's a researcher at Migration Watch. Look, ladies and gents, it's pretty straightforward, this, isn't it? Do you back this bill or not? And even with Steve outlining some of the potential pitfalls of it there, do you still back it? I am looking here at some absolutely devastating figures of migrant hotels. And I'm very pleased that these figures have been brought to us. 363 migrant hotels in England. 20 in Northern Ireland, 10 in Scotland. So, you know, all this lovely refugees welcome brigade north of the border there. Well, actually, they're not particularly welcoming, clearly. And 2 in Wales, OK? So there we go. And this is costing the taxpayer around £6.3 million a day and the rest. Companies that are being tasked with willy-nilly taking over some of these hotels to have them as migrant holding centres, essentially, asylum seeker hotels, they are absolutely coining it in. Their profits are trebling year on year as a result of this cottage industry that we have now. But it's all very well and good for people to sit here and go, well, you know, gosh, what do we do about it? What do we do? This is the reality of it. 363 local communities in England alone will have at least one migrant hotel in their area. And they might not like that. They might feel less safe as a result, and they want something done about that. And is this not really the reason why the government is trying to outsource things to Rwanda, to reduce the burden on our public services, to reduce the cost of the taxpayer, although I am aware that it costs quite a bit to send them to Rwanda, but certainly reduce the ongoing cost to the taxpayer? Does the government not have a duty to do that? And the argument now appears to be, from a lot of people, oh, Rwanda's not even a deterrent. It won't be a deterrent. Why? Because it looks so nice. And a lot of those people are the same people who are arguing that we can't send them to Rwanda because it's a human rights cesspit. So go figure. Anyway, get your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But moving on for a little while, is Vladimir Putin really going to be arrested for war crimes? We will be bringing you live on this very show Dominic Raab, and he's going to have a press conference about this apparently. So there we go. I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News. Don't move.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back. Now, it's fair to say the SNP are in turmoil. In the last few weeks, their leader has resigned, their media chief has stepped down, and now the party's chief executive has also gone. One of their leadership candidates apparently shouldn't be anywhere near politics because she also has religious beliefs which she says wouldn't interfere with politics. And then another guy who also has religious beliefs which potentially he lies about so that he can get on in politics, but has been demonstrably awful in every political role he's had, is the favourite to win. It is chaos. Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Murrell, was chief executive of the party since 1999, which in itself, of course, hey, all above board, obviously. But he's now quit after a row over membership numbers. Let's talk to Brian Monteith, who's a former member of the Scottish Parliament. Brian, great stuff. Thank you very much for joining us. What's going on with Nicola Sturgeon's husband?
Well, Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Murrow, had actually taken over as chief executive back in 1999. He's been there running the party all that time. And Nicola Sturgeon and him didn't marry till something like 2010. But what we have had, effectively, since she became First Minister, is a situation when the husband and wife team are running the government and running the party of government. Now, can you imagine the outrage there would have been had Boris and Carrie Johnson had been running the UK government and running the Conservative Party? Naturally, people would think there'd be conflicts of interest and potential problems for good governance. But this really was never an arrangement that the Sturgeons or the Murrows, if we might call them that, were challenged on by the Scottish press. But we have seen since Nicola Sturgeon resigned, a kind of worms open up about the conduct of the election process, which will, of course, produce a First Minister. But although Nicola Sturgeon hasn't backed anyone herself, the feeling was that the party under Peter Murrow was actually backing Humza Yousaf.
Yeah, indeed. But why does it matter that now, supposedly, it was hidden from prospective candidates that the SNP has lost 30,000 members? I mean, why was it hidden? Why does it matter?
Well, that's a good question. Obviously, parties don't like to admit that they are losing members, but it makes me wonder, for instance, is there a relationship in the sense of losing 50,000 members since the last general election relevant to the cash flow problems that the parties had that led to the chief executive actually having to give a loan of £107,000? Is that a relationship? Well, you certainly think that membership income could be a factor. That question doesn't seem to be getting asked. Certainly, the party's accounts would be hit badly by the drop, even in the last 6 months or so, of 30,000 members going away, because of it tells its own story about people rejecting the SNP policies.
Well, it does. Well, it's shocking whichever way you dress it up. Look, I can't help but wonder whether or not one day you and I might end up sat here talking about a development which would appear to hint at the idea that maybe there'd been a bit of a racket run north of the border.
Well, there's certainly a racket in another sense about the constant grievance culture that we never stopped hearing under Nicola Sturgeon, which I have to say, Alex Salmond was always a glass-half-full person, an optimist who talked Scotland up as the reason to have independence, whereas Nicola Sturgeon's route to market was to talk Britain down. Yeah. And that racket's been... We'll
leave it there, Brian.
This election...
We'll leave it there. Just the sound was a bit bad and also we're a bit pressed for time, but I think we got the gist, didn't we? Brian Monteith there, former member of the Scottish Parliament. Fascinating stuff. Do not take your eyes off what's going on north of the border there. It's absolute chaos for the SNP at the minute. Losing the membership, serious question marks as to the SNP's finances and, of course, who was in charge of that and where some of the money may or may not have gone, and the calibre of candidate that is about to take over from Nicola Sturgeon as well. It is an absolute shocker, one of comic proportions. Anyway, loads still to come between now and 6 p.m. We will hear from Dominic Raab. Big stuff, this, because Vladimir Putin was slapped with an international arrest warrant. Dominic Raab is going to be addressing the press on this. We will take that live on this show. But first, it is your latest headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. The DUP says it's going to vote against the government in this week's first parliamentary vote on the new Brexit deal. The Prime Minister agreed the new Windsor framework with the EU last month, aiming to resolve some of the concerns unionists have, particularly concerning the Stormont break within the Northern Ireland Protocol. Party leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson acknowledged significant progress had been made, but said the new proposed deal doesn't cover fundamental problems. Also in the news today, members of the RMT and Network Rail have voted to accept an offer covering pay, jobs and conditions. Staff will receive a pay rise of between 9.2 and 14.4% and increased back pay. The union says its 20,000 members voted 76% in favour of the new deal. China's president has called Vladimir Putin a dear friend as the pair sat down to talks in Moscow. President Xi Jinping is in Russia on his first visit to the country since the start of the invasion of Ukraine. Downing Street says it hopes President Xi will urge President Putin to stop the war. President Putin says he's open to negotiation, but warned he won't accept ultimata. The UN chief is calling on rich nations to urgently accelerate their shift to net zero emissions by 2040. That's after a new report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warned emissions must be halved by the mid-2030s if the world is to have any chance of limiting temperature rises to 1.5 degrees. And that's a key target from the Paris Agreement. The report, which Antonio Guterres has branded the survival guide for humanity, says there's little time to lose. And those are your latest news headlines. I'm back at the top of the hour. See you then.
OK, look, ladies and gentlemen, very shortly I'm going to be whizzing you over to Lancaster House, where Dominic Raab is going to be talking in relation to Vladimir Putin being issued with that, essentially, international arrest warrant, isn't it, for alleged war crimes, etc. So I'll bring you up to date on that. We're going to throw it over. Look, I've just got a couple of seconds where I want to delve into the inbox and liven things up a little bit, because I was asking you earlier on, in light of the fact that new figures have revealed that apparently we're a nation of shoplifters now, people are getting addicted to shoplifting left, right and centre. I thought, what's the worst, most pathetic experience you've ever had with nicking stuff as a kid, really? Oh, I believe, well, there you go. Talking of things that are criminal, we are going to go now to Dominic Raab, who's talking about Vladimir Putin and the ICC arrest warrant. Let's go there now. I believe we're going there now. Yes, there we go.
Minister from the Netherlands, with whom I co-hosted. We had a successful day. The chief prosecutor made his shopping list, if you like, of the areas of support that he needs to do the job, particularly in relation to Ukraine, but also his wider mandate. We also were lucky enough to hear from President Zelensky directly, and I can tell you that we raised over £4 million in additional contributions and a whole range of non-financial technical support for the work of the ICC, from disaster victim identification experts, the Danish have offered, through to forensic experts from our Dutch friends and the Belgians and the Czechs, the list of support that we provided, investigative support, but also support with witnesses. And as well as that, there is an interesting offer from Ghana for a relocation agreement for victims and witnesses, and a whole range. That's just a sense of some of the highlights. But given the indictment of President Putin on Friday, I think it was really important that we matched our words with deeds and showed the practical support to give effect to the ICC's mandate. So that just gives you a flavour of what we discussed today. Dealan, over to you if there's anything else you'd like to add.
I think that covers it all. I would just like to thank you, because without your effort, it wasn't not possible to be here with so many countries, and just again focusing on the core issue of today, and how do we prevent impunity and how do we help victims. So thank you again, and I think you covered it all.
Great. Well, open to questions. Have we got David from the BBC here? David.
Thank you very much. David Wallace-Lockhart from the BBC. Mr Raab, what can the UK do to ensure that Vladimir Putin faces justice?
Well, I think there's a number of things. First of all, I think hosting this event just a few days fortuitously after that indictment, bringing countries together. We've always said our vision of global Britain is as a force for good in the world, using our soft power, our convening power. Of course, we do it with our Dutch friends who host the International Criminal Court. I think that's very powerful. Having over 40 countries come here and pledge new practical support, which is the kind of nuts and bolts that a criminal court, an international criminal court, needs to do the job. Remember, it's stuck out there in The Hague, there's a court, but you think of all the other wraparound support that any justice system would have, from investigators to witness relocation. That's the kind of practical things that we can do. And if you're asking, will Putin inevitably sit it out? Well, I remember as a young war crimes lawyer in The Hague in 2004, negotiating a sentence enforcement agreement with the UN for the Yugoslavia Tribunal. And 17 years later, Karadzic ended up in a jail, a British jail, as a result of it. Charles Taylor ended up in jail. Milosevic was brought to trial. So I think we've got justice on our side, and I think we've got history on our side, but we'll need to be patient. Can we take a question from Marie from AFP? Is Marie here?
Hello. Can you go more in details about the £4 million additional support that you talked about? Where do they come from? Which countries? Thank you.
I don't know whether you were keeping the Dutch, of course.
No,
the Dutch and the UK put in, but there are 2 or 3 different areas for the support. I was keeping an overall tally. I didn't have the full breakdown, but I would say that actually quite a few countries put in what they can. Of course, there's the regular budget. The ICC needs to be funded on a regular basis. But actually, particularly given the workload involved in Ukraine, I think it's right that those of us that can step up with some extra support. Do you remember any of the others?
No, well, everybody did what they could. So that's on the one hand giving expertise, sending people over from the military, from the police, from different areas, because it's very important that we ensure that we have the evidence that's right now in Ukraine. And of course, a few of the countries also said we have additional funds, and that will go on the one hand to the Diversity Fund, and on the other hand to supporting victims.
Right, OK, I think we can all agree that's quite enough of that. So, yes, welcome back, everybody. Now, that was our Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary Dominic Raab. He was holding a news conference after that meeting, which was in support of the International Criminal Court, and that, of course, was in relation to Vladimir Putin essentially being issued with an international arrest warrant. But we are going to talk now to an individual who specialises in what really this could mean for Vladimir Putin, OK? It's Global Sanctions and War Crimes Specialist. It is Sarah Elizabeth Dill. Sarah, thank you very, very much. Yes, OK, now it's fair to say that press conference was absolute snoozeville, but there is a serious point underlying all of this, isn't it? Which is essentially whether or not Vladimir Putin is going to be arrested anytime soon. What do you think?
I think the chances of that are extremely slim. This is a very symbolic effort that the ICC prosecutor engaged in. It's intended to send a message. The fact that this is only the 3rd time in history that we've had a head of state indicted. And if you look at the case in Sudan, you have Bashir, who still has not been brought before the ICC. And so I think it's highly unlikely, and especially given how much Putin has isolated himself in recent months, that we won't see him before the ICC anytime soon.
No, OK, all right. So what is this now? Just international posturing, just saying, look, Vlad, we don't like you very much, and one day, we will come and put you in handcuffs?
I think it's definitely an attempt by the ICC to send a strong message that they are going to be pursuing prosecutions. However, there's a number of challenges to this, aside from the arguments that President Putin can put up if he is ever brought before the court as to jurisdiction, diplomatic immunity, head of state immunity. There's also this UN Security Council has the possibility Russia could put forward a 12-month suspension of the ICC investigation in the interests of international security and peace. And whilst the ICC prosecutor, put forward a message that he wants to send a message to others that they will be pursuing things, I think it also calls into question some legitimacy of the ICC as you look at other long-standing investigations where you don't have arrest warrants yet, where you don't have indictments. And so this was a very, very quick indictment and arrest warrant. And I think it will be interesting how it poses problems for even, pursuing peace between Russia and Ukraine.
Well, that's interesting, actually. Look, Brian's been on, and Brian says it's not worth the paper it's written on, this ICC arrest warrant, and I think a lot of people will be sympathetic to that. A lot of other people will be saying, well, Vladimir Putin looks a lot like a war criminal, and his behaviour would appear to be that of a war criminal, and so maybe there's a good thing to have some legal validation to that argument. But you alluded there to the idea that it, might make it even more difficult to get some kind of peace deal, do you think? Why is that?
I think at this juncture, the world, it's been a very imbalanced posture. You have sanctions being put forward on a regular basis from the US, from other places, attempts to isolate Russia diplomatically, which whether that's going to be successful, given the comments from the Chinese president this morning in reaction to this, as well as Russia's other ties around the world. But it is questionable whether Putin will have any incentive at this point to come to the table. But even the risks that he now faces in being arrested, if he steps into 124 different countries in the world who are supposed to be bound to arrest him if he's within their jurisdiction, it limits kind of the dialogue he may want to engage in.
I have seen some interesting arguments. It's 20 years since the Iraq War, OK, and people saying, well, there wasn't a huge amount of international condemnation when another, albeit despotic, but sovereign nation was carpet bombed by ourselves and America. And people may be saying that it's a little bit two-faced to be slating Putin in the way that we are right now. What do you make of that when it comes to a war crimes kind of bent on this? Oh, well, that was bad timing to lose it, wasn't it? There we go. I can promise you that we were not being censored in any way, shape or form there, but there we go. That was Global Sanctions and War Crimes Specialist Sarah Elizabeth Dill, at least for a little period of time. I'm going to delve into the inbox now, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I have been asking you, jovially, OK, throughout the course of this show, what is the most pathetic thing that you ever nicked as a kid? And the reason why I'm asking that is because apparently, and this is a serious element to it, shoplifting is on the rise. We used to be a nation of shopkeepers. Now, supposedly, we are a nation of shoplifters, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just, though, because of people struggling to deal with the cost of living crisis. No, it's more to it than that. Apparently, people are getting addicted to the buzz of shoplifting, supposedly. And some people see it as some kind of a victimless crime because they think, well, Tesco's and all these shops, they're massive stores. They're not going to notice, are they? And who's really out of pocket as a result of that? But I was asking you anyway, what you think the most pathetic thing you ever nicked as a kid was. And you have, ladies and gentlemen, served up some absolute corkers. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Patrick, this is my favourite. It's from Dave. Patrick, I was aged 11 and I stole a Mars bar from behind the counter of my local chippy. Dave, you animal. You animal. And when the staff... and then went back in, I ran out. I felt so guilty. I dug a hole and buried it in the woods. Fantastic. I mean, there's so much going on there, Dave, isn't there? So first you got behind the counter, you nicked it, you legged it, you felt guilty, and instead of just destroying the evidence by eating the Mars bar, you thought, I'll tell you what, I will bury it in the woods. There we go. I've got a couple of others here. I won't name you on this one. My daughter's 7-year-old son was caught with sweets in his pocket on 2 occasions. I mean, the kids today. Anyway, she threatened to take him to the police if he did it again. So she caught him in the shop, again stealing. So he's gone for the hat-trick of nicking stuff here. He's asking for it. She put him in the car, took him to the local police station, and the police were brilliant. They simulated an arrest and a sentencing, and he's never stolen anything again. Yeah, fair enough. Oh, I love it, and that is obviously quite a good way to teach your kids a lesson. I would wonder, though, whether or not actually he's just getting better at stealing and you don't notice. But anyway, thank you very much, everyone who's been getting in touch in this. Make sure you keep those views coming, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But today, ladies and gentlemen, is International Day of Happiness, although you would not have known it if you'd been watching some of the rest of this show. Let me know what makes you happy as well, and we're going to be delving into why International Happiness Day is so important. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
Hello, it's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Tune in tonight at 8 o'clock for State of the Nation. I'll be here live in the studio with my venerable panel, consisting of England's favourite socialist, Mr. Stephen Pound, and the esteemed historian, Dr. David Starkey. Of course, we want to hear from you, the British people. Don't forget to email me, mailmog@gbnews.uk. All that and much more coming up at 8 o'clock on State of the Nation.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. Now, it's potentially quite a big day and a really big period of time, this, for the Rwanda deal. I was actually broadcasting live one evening when we had the camera shot of the plane due to take off from the airport with all the lights on, people on board, destined for Rwanda. And live on air, the lights went off, people were let off the plane, the lights at the airport went off, and all of the camera crew went home. And we thought, well, why is that? And it emerged, of course, because there was an overnight, last-minute decision from a foreign European judge in a dark room somewhere, who we will never really know, who decided that we in this country were not allowed to remove people that we in this country didn't want here. Anyway, we are now, grief, about a year on from that, aren't we? Suella Braverman has just got back from Rwanda and addressed the House of Commons. And Rishi Sunak, as well, is trying to get his illegal migration bill through. Now, what is fascinating is that around, the latest polling shows that around 52% of people, so it is a majority, 52% of people actively support the principles behind that bill, which is being able to deport people and not allowing anyone who illegally enters this country to go on to repeatedly claim asylum. So 52% of people. So if you're on social media and you see a very vocal group of people saying that they don't like it, well, actually, they represent, get this, just 16% of people. So yet another reminder that Twitter is not real life. But one of the key things that Suella Braverman now believes that she can do and that we can do as a nation is stay within the ECHR and still deport people. What's changed? Well, supposedly, and this is the big news, supposedly the European judges have backed down on what is known as Rule 39. So Rule 39, which allowed these last-minute stoppages, supposedly they are going to row back on that. And this is absolutely massive news because it might mean that we're not going to get blocked by European judges, and so the illegal migration bill could work. And this was one of the reasons why a lot of people were considering voting against it, which is they thought, well, look, in principle, I back it. In principle, I agree we should be stopping small boats. In principle, I agree all of this. But it won't work anyway, because it will just get bogged down by the European courts. And certainly a lot of the hardline Tories, the European Research Group, they were the ones who were saying, I'm going to vote against this because it's going to get held up. But now, if they are actually going to end up being able to do it through the medium of the European courts, that could well be a good thing. So that was a big development. But something else dropped today that really piqued my attention, and it's been ignored, I think, largely this, and it is the sheer scale of the migrant hotels that are currently being used in this country. And in all of this talk of far right, in all of this talk of racism, in all of this talk of 1930s Germany, what has been lost in all of this is really the genuine reason why schemes like Rwanda need to work. Because if only just one hotel in the whole of the UK was being used to house people coming here across the Channel, then we wouldn't have a problem, would we? And people wouldn't mind. But around £7 million worth of taxpayers' money every single day is going into these asylum seeker hotels. And now the numbers have dropped. 363 of them in England, 20 in Northern Ireland, just 10 in Scotland, by the way, in case you're wondering, 2 in Wales as well. 45% of all asylum applications in 2022, all asylum applications in 2022, were from people who came across the Channel in small boats. And when you look at the scale of that problem there, and you look at the amount of cost that it is, and you look at the amount of local areas and local residents who will be worried and concerned about public safety right across, especially England, but the rest of the UK as well, is it not imperative that people get this Rwanda scheme going? And does it not hammer home another key line that Suella Braverman was talking about, which is this, and this is fascinating. She says, only snobs really don't support the Rwanda deal. She was, of course, alluding to Gary Lineker. And I do think this is a point that's worth making. A lot of people who live in very secure £1 million housing, who can afford to send their kids very often to very expensive boarding schools and maybe even decide that they want to sue that boarding school when their child doesn't get the grades that they were expecting to get as a result of them paying for their children to go to that boarding school. I, of course, couldn't be alluding to anybody here. People who maybe don't necessarily always pay their huge amount of tax that they could be paying to this country as well. People who don't really see the impacts of mass immigration, both legal and illegal, and who don't live anywhere near a migrant hotel. Those people tend to be the ones who are opposed to the Rwanda plan, not your average common man and woman on the street. And that's the story that Suella Braverman was trying to say. So that's where I think we are at with this at the moment. But it does tie in, doesn't it, just finally on this, to where Rishi Sunak and the government is at in general. If this illegal migration bill passes, and if they manage to keep us in the ECHR at the same time as getting those flights taking off to Rwanda, and if people now are starting to say, well, actually, Rwanda does look quite nice and it's not a bad thing that people are going there, and it acts as a deterrent, and you add that to a list of other things that Rishi Sunak may well have achieved in the last 3.5 weeks, such as stopping the strikes, such as getting an international deal when it comes to AUKUS, for example, a defence pact, putting more money into the defence spending, and then, yes, giving the French a bit of cash as well to hopefully stop the Channel migrant crisis. Is it all, and the economy, by the way, not being as disastrous and cataclysmic as we were expecting, is it all coming up, Rishi? Anyway, watch this space, ladies and gents, because we're going to keep you abreast of it all. I do like your views on this, gbviews at gbnews.uk, and Paul says Labour are out of touch. All they do is bang on about these poor people who pay thousands to get into the UK, but the fundamental thing is that they miss out is illegal. And again, people are talking, aren't they, about, well, so-and-so had a refugee in his house and, you know, they were vetted. And then the argument to that is, well, they're all vetted, aren't they? Well, yeah, the genuine ones are. People who've actually received asylum in this country and people who've actually received refugee status in this country, yeah, they are. But not all the ones who are just rocking up and staying in asylum seeker hotels. Andrew says, I don't blame migrants trying to get here. I trust mostly that they're probably good people who want to get away from dictatorships. Anthony says, this plan is so badly needed. We can't just keep accepting large, excessive numbers of illegal migrants into our country. The snobs who don't like it are either blind to the situation or do not care at all. So some of your views there to wrap us up for this show. I am joined in the studio now, though, by the wonderful Michelle Dewberry with Jubes & Co. How are you? Are you all right?
I'm all right, but I'm a bit confused.
Why?
Why is there a table full of party poppers?
I'm glad you asked.
What is this going on?
It's International Day of Happiness, Michelle.
Oh,
Happy,
is it?
hang day. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, hang on.
Okay.
I can't even pull a party popper.
You were
away.
aim it at my eye. Anyway, right, there we go. So are you particularly happy today? I imagine this is terrible radio, by the way.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, I'm all right, actually. I woke up in a bad mood, but I turned it around.
Dare I ask?
I don't know, you just have those days, don't you? But I was very moody today, but now I'm all right. Looking forward to my show tonight.
What do we got on? What's on the agenda?
20 years, of course, to the day that the UK followed the US into Iraq. I've just heard you guys then talking about the ICC and about Putin. There's lots of people, many of my viewers perhaps, that will be saying that actually the person that should have been investigated and perhaps behind bars is none other than Tony Blair.
I agree.
Is that right or not? I'll have one of his former advisors on my panel tonight as well, so interested in his view. Of course, as well, Rwanda. What's going on there, and will it ever work? That is a $1 million question, isn't it? Well, multiple $1 million
Multiple $1 million questions. So basically, tune in to earn millions of pounds. Look, Michelle, thank you very much. As ever, it's going to be box office. I've been Patrick Christys. Thank you very much. I'll see you at 3 tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Plenty of wet weather around through this week, but drier and brighter spells in between. Not a huge amount of brightness out there today, a lot of cloud around, but it is pretty mild because between these two weather systems, this is called a warm sector. So some quite warm air in here, and well, we've seen a bit of brightness. Temperatures have been jumping up into the mid, even high teens in a few places. But we do have wet weather from those weather fronts pushing across Scotland, in through Northern Ireland, and another spell of rain coming into Wales and the southwest. A few showers further east, but many places dry this evening until this rain band works its way to the east overnight. Behind that, there'll be a few breaks in the clouds, some clearer spells. But the mild air persists overnight, so temperatures staying at 9 or 10 Celsius in some towns and cities. As for tomorrow, well, overall, it's a similar kind of day, but should be a bit brighter, I suspect. Some early rain across eastern England, staying pretty damp across the Northern Isles for much of the day. And then we'll see some showers for southwest Scotland, Northern England, spreading to the east. Could even see 1 or 2 heavy ones, maybe even a thunderstorm, most likely over the Pennines. Further south and west, though, not too many showers. Better chance tomorrow of seeing some sunshine, some blue sky. And the air is still mild, so temperatures will be up into the teens once more. 15, 16 is possible. Cooler as the breeze starts to pick up, and more rain pushes into Northern Ireland come the afternoon. That is a spell of wet and windy weather that swings across all areas during Tuesday night. Some brighter colours there in the west. There will be some heavier bursts of rain, at least for a time. This rain then around on Wednesday morning, clearing away from Scotland, although lingering in Shetland, and clearing away from the southeast by the afternoon too. Many places then brightening up again through Wednesday with some spells of sunshine, but a few showers are likely to develop through the day. Quite a gusty wind on Wednesday, a blustery, boisterous kind of day, and not quite as mild, but still temperatures 10 to 13 or 14 Celsius. Goodbye.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows.